Elfkin? Vampire? Wolf spirit? They truly believed they weren't human, and then the truth broke them. My best friend in high school and my first 2 years of college genuinely believed that she could not only speak to forests, but that she was a wingless fairy. She would oftentimes, when we went walking her dogs, lean up to trees and translate for me what the rustling of nature was speaking of. She'd also be scribbling in her books what she called new alchemy, violently scribbling circles and vague shapes that she believed held magical and fey magics through her own powers. We had a falling out after a few years after she moved to the other side of the country to be with her grandmother. We recently took up communication again, and I found out she had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. She's currently on 2 types of medications, and she told me her walks are depressingly quiet now. Oh man, this one made me sad. I hope she finds a balance between the 2 worlds. Okay, hear me out. It wasn't exactly the same as otherkin, but very much in the vein of the question in terms of total reality denial. I knew someone who totally, wholeheartedly believes they are a Jedi Master. Our families go way back, so I happen to know other kids were merciless to him all through childhood. He's always had problems, though. Kind of one of those people you can feel aren't quite right, but not exactly sure why. You see, he decided he was a Jedi Master one day, just like out of the blue. Credit where credit's due, he went all the way with it. Became a minor nerd celebrity for a while. At first, people challenged the whole Jedi thing, like, why don't you have powers then? And he'd say, Jedi is a mindset, not a power. Or sometimes, you don't know the powers I may have. And try to play it off like a joke, but the guy was 100% serious, believe me. If you pushed, he would outright melt down with tears and screaming. Apparently his parents financially supported him pretty much entirely up until he, and this part confuses the crap out of me, got married and had a kid while still insisting on the Jedi thing. After that, the wife supported him. Eventually he got tired of that and left his family to take off with a younger person that he met at a convention. That's when the rest of us cut ties with him. You can be a Jedi all you want, my dude, but cutting and leaving your kid is some Sith Lord level crap. One of our other commenters has written in, saying what we're all thinking, how the frick am I still single and these people are getting married and having kids? Maybe there are some powers there. Yeah, too right. I went to a school with a girl who acted like a dog. She barked, panted, pawed at people. In class, she'd reply normally, but then just bark at the end of her legitimate question. This went on for 3 years. I decided to look her up on Facebook, and she has a good job and seems normal. Teenagers are frickin' weird, man. My cousin. She 100% believed she was a werewolf. She was finally diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar years ago. She's doing a lot better now. Well, that's the second time that the particular diagnosis of schizophrenia has reared its head, so it may be that it's coming up more in the immediate future of this video. I'm also curious if there are more Jedis. He claimed to have an invisible tail, and had a dream in which a great mother wolf revealed to him that he had the soul of a wolf. So, naturally, he did what any sane person would do and started buying furs to just crank it into. He showed me some eBay links via Facebook and explained that it's one of the only 2 ways that he can get himself going. Ugh. He also claimed to do other things to real-life dogs that I just can't say on this platform, guys. Last I heard, he's in Alaska, working with sled dogs. All the while, he's engaged to a woman who he refuses to do the deed with because human whoopee is just disgusting to him. I need a drink just frickin' writing that. And I need a drink just after recording it. Yeah, somebody might want to check on those dogs. I met a guy who's supposedly pretty close to the level in Scientology where you're supposed to develop powers like telepathy and stuff. I'm not sure what became of him. You'd think that once people reached this level and didn't have powers, they'd quit. But I guess the brainwashing is strong. I think some of it is the sunken cost fallacy, some of it's gaslighting. The church might say that you didn't do something right or that your conviction wasn't strong enough after all. If you aren't getting what you thought you would get out of it, you're doing it wrong. That sort of thing. Sometimes people follow the carrot way too long, thinking the truth is just around the corner. Yeah, they had really severe stuff going on in their childhood and coped with it by believing they were psychic. By the way, we met in like junior high when they still believed this. Eventually, they realized that they weren't entirely wrong, just a little bit misdirected. They're a deeply empathetic person who, thanks to their history, is very good at reading facial expressions, body language and stuff. They're actually a really wonderful person, and ended up becoming a social worker and volunteer at a domestic shelter, where all the qualities that made them a good, quote, psychic, make them great at helping others who aren't going through a difficult time. Well, that's a nice outcome for a story, at least. Alright, buckle the F up, people, because I was that kid in middle school. Oh, this'll be good. I wholeheartedly believed that I was a forest elf. I don't even really remember how it started, but I always loved fantasy novels growing up, especially the ones about mythical creatures and nymphs and fairies, all that crap. In middle school, I wore a lot of earthy colors, always had flowers in my hair, joined the archery club, which I was not good at, mind you, wore elf ears to school, and I mostly walked around barefoot. Although I couldn't get away with that last one at school. I thought I'd communicate with forest animals and navigate myself using only the trees and any water source. Needless to say, I was definitely picked on a lot. Yeah, go figure. I'm 26 now, and I'm an IT consultant, married to a damn great guy, and I have a baby girl on the way. I never picked up archery again. I promise. Someone I used to be friends with identified as a lynx. I was weirded out, but she was also my friend, so I dealt with it. Soon she started to say that I was sitting on her tail, and she was fully convinced that she turned into a full-blown cat at night. Last I heard, she was drawing furry smut for $100 a piece. A lot of people are writing to me about how short lynxes' tails are. Look, I know that. This person was just really delusional. I was sitting a whole desk away from her when she made that accusation. A couple of other things she did was claim that she was sorry because I accidentally clawed you with my claws. She had only put her hand on my shoulder, by the way. She also complained that the teacher was hurting her ears because she was talking and that affected her supernatural cat hearing. Another time, she tried to go a week without glasses to prove that her eyes were becoming more like a cat's. Well, that didn't last an hour. Finally, she attempted to start a furry/Therian club. Don't know what that is. Her campaign was along the lines of, join our cult to unleash your inner animal. And yes, she did use the word cult. Hey, well, at least she's honest. That must have been some good frickin' art for $100. Well, as a furry artist myself, I'm shocked at how much some of the more amazing artists make. I've seen YHCs, your character here by the way, with a buyout of $5,000 for a slot. It's absolutely nuts. I knew a guy that swore that he was a reincarnated kitsune spirit. He and I got into an argument one day, and he swore that he'd destroy my life, because kitsunes never let go of grudges. I suppose to his point, mythologically, kitsunes were described as being especially capricious. He ended up telling a bunch of lies about me to everyone that he could, tricked another friend into cutting off contact with me, and occasionally I'll run into someone online that fell for one of the many stories that he made up about me. Oh boy, one of these people actually followed through. This isn't exactly what you're asking for, but it is similar. From 1st to 6th grade, I had this friend, Allie, who genuinely believed she could see dead people and demons and whatnot. She'd do the stereotypical vampire things, like pretending to bite people, showing off her canines, talking about blood, that kind of stuff. But that wasn't like her main thing. She had this one demon that she said followed her everywhere and hid in the bathrooms that we just called it. Allie always described it as being whiter than paper with 2 slits for a nose and sharp fangs. I wholeheartedly believed her because why wouldn't I? I was a dumb kid that wanted supernatural things to be real, and she was my best friend that had no reason to lie to me. I literally was too scared to use the restroom at school because she said it always peeked over the stall. Ooh. As the years went on, though, I eventually realized that she was making it up. But the conviction with which she said that kind of stuff was scary. I know her parents were going through a rough patch at the time, so I think she was just making it up for attention, which she got. I haven't talked to Allie in a while, but another friend of mine ran into her at a fair recently and said she seemed to be doing well. I'm glad things are better for her. Well, glad to hear it. I wonder if that's another case of our old friend bipolar medicine working its magic in people's lives. Impossible to say, really. It manifests in different ways. A few of these people are probably just seeing how far they can take this sort of thing, and it might just be down to excessive lying. Years before we had goths and New Age enlightenment, I used to manage an occult bookstore, and I met wannabe vampires, werewolves, fae, and others. Yeah, well, if you want to meet these people, that's the job for it, I guess. Sometimes it was like being in charge of a Dark Shadows convention. I used to date one of the store's patrons, a 6-foot Amazon from Texas, who claimed she was a vampire. She wasn't too crazy, but towards the end of the relationship, she was getting a bit too bitey. My ex-boyfriend was certain that he was a vampire. He kept going to churches, cemeteries, all those kinds of places. I failed at bringing him back to reality. He died of cancer in January this year. Ooh, that was a right turn. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? When I was in the US Navy, we had this guy who thought he was a wolf in a human body. He would howl at the moon and just be generally strange. I know someone that had served with him before me at a different command who said he had to be forced by medical to shower. Oof. When asked why he wasn't showering, he told them it would wash away his scent and he wouldn't be able to attract a mate. I do not know what happened to him. This was aboard the Theodore Roosevelt in 2007. I know he was also on board a carrier in Florida. I'm pretty confident he was a conventional MM. She cheated on her boyfriend occasionally, but would claim that it's not cheating because she'd only do it during full moons, so it was her werewolf half doing it, and not her. Oh boy. I knew a girl like this. She's now an astrology nut that does a lot of A at music festivals and cheats on her boyfriend when Venus is in Gatorade or some other crap. Way back in the 80s, while I was still in elementary school, there was this kid who every day swore he was a ninja. He couldn't show us any of his moves or weapons, as his sensei had forbidden it. But let me tell you, that didn't stop him from making his outlandish claims, like the nunchaku and ninja stars he had hidden in a backpack, or how he'd fought and killed an entire gang. That kind of thing. One day he claimed he could spin so fast that he could turn invisible. Several classmates demanded he prove it during free time, and for whatever reason, he finally relented. He started spinning in circles, but we could still see him. So he kept spinning. Spinning until he threw up. Well, yeah. When I was in uni, one of my housemates had his mate come over and hang out with us one night. At the time, we were all into tabletop RPGs and stuff, so when I started chatting to him and he mentioned he was a half-angel, half-demon demon hunter, I initially didn't bat an eye at it. I was just like, oh, that's cool, I'm a telekinetic spirit medium myself, and we chatted happily about it for maybe 10 minutes before I began to clock that he wasn't talking about RPGs. Look, I've got to admit that when I did figure it out, I was not diplomatic. Not aggressive or anything, but certainly not diplomatic. I may have laughed at him. One of my closest friends that I lived with through most of college thought she had special powers. It was weird, to say the least. She'd been bullied all her life, and I always reckoned she had developed this as a coping mechanism. The thing that really stood out to me, though, was that she was so good at getting people to play along with it, and I have no idea how. I saw this scenario play out a few times during the time we lived together, and I was always so confused as to how she kept getting people on board, so to speak. The general scenario went like this. She'd meet someone, and if she really liked them, then after a while she'd tell me in a very knowing sort of way that she thought they had the gift, aka that they also had powers. She also told me once she thought that I had them, and I just kind of smiled and nodded and said, okie dokie then. So then she'd get together for lunch or something with this person and she'd launch into this full-on spiel about how she was all that was standing between the world and destruction, and she could tell that they were also special, and she needed someone to help her fight these battles. Not literal battles, you understand, more like astral projection type battles. Oh good. And she needed them to help her guard the gates. Hilarious side note, the gates were colored. Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. She got mad at me one time when I referred to them as the printer gates. And you'd think that after unloading all of that, people would run screaming, but the thing is, they just didn't. They'd show up at our apartment to talk to her, and they'd be talking about all these battles and things. All I can figure is that she was really good at spotting other people with overactive imaginations who didn't fit in well. She probably would have made a great cult leader, to be honest. She now works in IT, and we still talk to each other pretty regularly. She wrote a fantasy novel that she's trying to get published, which was actually quite good when she let me read the draft. I'm guessing that became the outlet for her stories when she grew up, so to speak. I kind of want to ask her about what was going on with her, but I kind of don't want to open that can of worms ever again either. When she wasn't in full-blown what the frick mode, she was the most kind and genuinely fun to be around person. I'm sort of afraid the printer gates will rear their ugly head again if I bring up that other stuff. Oh, and for everyone that keeps assuming people were going along with it because she was hot, I'm just going to leave it at this. The bullying she had been dealing with was because of her physical appearance and weight. Oh, I think the appeal is more along the lines of what one person said in a reply, in an unfortunate parallel to Charles Manson. She was good at spotting cast-off people, and then you're just excited to belong to something, so these people went along with it. Well, the other occasional repeated trait that we see from some of these folks is how often they end up writing fiction. Seems like some of them really do manage to harness that imagination into something really meaningful and, more importantly, non-disruptive to their lives. And hey, more power to them. Had this guy in my Navy machine shop, no idea how he made it through basic training, but this guy absolutely believed he was a werewolf. We were deployed and working night shift on the flight deck of an LHD, and the desk sergeant told him to go do a job on one of the aircraft. He flat out refused, stating it was a full moon and he'd turn into a wolf if he went outside. So, in true Flightline fashion, a few of us dragged him outside. Wait, is this the same guy from the other story? He was kicking, snarling, howling, growling, and when we got to the flight deck, he starts wrenching and making weird screeching noises, like he actually thought he was transforming into a wolf. He started saying, "Oh, you don't want to be around for this. I get very violent when I'm a wolf." And then proceeded to jump and run around on all fours, acting like he was a werewolf. I guess we couldn't really tell what it was meant to be. We were all just laughing our butts off. We knew he was weird before deployment, but no one really knew how weird, and we certainly weren't prepared for that. He was also the stinky kid in the shop. So we striped his body wash to see if he was using it. He'd strip down and go to the showers in a towel and shower shoes and everything. But he'd stand in there and not turn the water on or just wet his hair to make it look like he'd showered. Well, after 2 weeks of the torque stripe on his body wash not being broken, and him stinking to high hell, the sergeant confronts him. He said that the water and body wash were bad for his fur and that werewolves don't like baths. So the sergeant said, "Fine, we'll bathe you like a dog then." So the sergeant tells his higher-ups what's going on and his plan and gets the go-ahead. Because at this point it's either what happens next or paperwork. 6 of us grabbed him out of his rack, dragged him to the showers, poured soap on him and scrubbed him with deck brushes. The whole time he was howling and barking and growling and all kinds of weird crap. When we got home, Gunny sent him to mental health to be evaluated, and it turns out he had some sort of weird identity dysphoria and legitimately believed he was a werewolf. He wasn't in the Marine Corps much longer after that. A few of us think he faked it to try and get sent home early from deployment on medical, and then kept it up when he realized he'd be able to get out of the Corps early, with medical disability associated with deployment and collect a check for the rest of his life, which let me tell ya, he does. When I was a kid, I think my classmates believed I thought I was a Power Ranger. I wore morphers constantly, it was my favorite show on TV, and I was kind of obsessed. Now, at the time, I may have pretended I was a Power Ranger in play, but look, I knew that I wasn't. I kept the morpher with me because I was so frickin' alone that I needed something. I was getting treated badly at home, school was just as bad, and I was incredibly anxious. I was throwing up every single morning before school multiple times. Oh, dude. Being that anxious all the time sucks, and I just wish the Rangers would come and rescue me. That's why the morphers were always with me. I was 9 or 10, and looking back, I knew they were the only reason why I'm still here. The thing is, though, I enjoyed the show until I was 13 because the show grew up with me. I kept it all quiet. The morphers stayed with me but hidden in my backpack after I turned 11. Somehow, thanks to my butthole mum, everyone knew that I was still watching it at home. Even after I stopped, people still believed I was just obsessed with it. And look, they weren't wrong, but I was trying to keep it quiet. Also, I don't know why it was such an issue in the first place. Everyone seemed to think I thought I was a Power Ranger, and I don't know why. That crap even followed me to university via one guy from my school. He very quickly shut up when I asked him why he was pulling his crap here. I'd never spoken to him before or had anything to do with him. He stayed out of my way after that. People. I never thought I was a Power Ranger, I just enjoyed the show and loved thinking about how it would be to be one. I mostly just thought about how I finally had a group of friends to hang out with and talk to. Actually, fighting some monster very rarely came into it. I was just an incredibly lonely and scared kid who latched onto something as a coping mechanism. Yeah, the mockery this poor guy was getting is the sort of thing that can really mess with people's early development when rumors go unchecked, isn't it? Unlike some of the other people in these stories who have the option to back out but double down instead, this guy tried to back out and couldn't shake the rumors. It sucks, man. I'm really glad that things seemed to get better for you once you left school." This guy legitimately thought he was a vampire. We were friends with benefits for a bit, and I caught him right at the beginning of that particular belief, as he defended himself biting through the skin on my neck by saying, "It's natural," and thus ended the boinking, and my neck hurt for a while. He then went through several years of weird blood drinking stuff with a group, did bloodletting too, into vials for shots. Well, what happened to him, you ask? He had to stop when he got deployed to Iraq. He remained odd, but the vampirism deceased. Yes, this was a typo, it should have been ceased, but it suits. He also had a lot of personal drama and ended up marrying some girl with a fatal condition in the hospital right before she died. We ended up losing contact at some point, as his novelty entertainment just wasn't worth putting up with his narcissism and weirdness for. One of my middle school teacher's children believed that he could talk to bees. He quickly enough learned that he could not actually talk to bees. I forget if he learned that he was allergic to bees. Oh, I mean, everyone can talk to bees. The tricky part is getting them to respond. Good point. Teachers, what's your "that student definitely isn't going places" moment? As a getting to know you activity, I asked students, if you could be anyone in history, who would you be and why? One student's answer, Eleanor Roosevelt, because I've always wanted to be black. Asked my student, 7th grade life science, why he has Fs in all of his classes and why he doesn't bother to care about it. He proceeds to tell me with the most confident smile that he's making it into the NBA. I assigned students to do a group presentation of a story from mythology at the end of the school year. I told them they could choose from Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Norse, or any other system they chose. 2 students chose a story from Norse mythology about Thor. They presented the story, which included characters like Loki, Captain America, Iron Man, etc., completely seriously. I spoke to them at the end of the class and they had no clue that Marvel Cinematic Universe was not a part of Norse mythology. Used to teach English in Japan. Had a 4-year-old kid who would run at top speed toward the wall, throw himself into it, stumble around going, ouch, for a few seconds, then do it all again, for an hour straight if we would let him. Had a 7-year-old who stripped off down to his underpants, then skipped around the room singing the Pokemon theme song for the whole class. Finally got him dressed up again just as the lesson ended. He looked up at me and said in complete seriousness, "Sensei, I did a good job." Had a 12-year-old kid who would take off his socks and chew on his toenails in the middle of my lessons. Kids, man, they're weird. I think, due to the behavior of the 4-year-old, there was a modest to good chance all of these were the same kid. It's not uncommon as a teacher to have students who are a bit behind the curve in certain aspects, but 99.9999% of the time, they are keen on something. They might not understand how to identify a noun or what theme is, but they somehow know how to make a mean plate of nachos. You learn pretty quick not to judge fish for their tree climbing ability, you know? I thought this was the rule when I was teaching until I met Kevin. Kevin isn't his real name, but it doesn't matter because he can't spell it anyway. Kevin was a student of mine during my last year of teaching. He came to my classroom with very little to show for his academic past. He had moved a few times and thus was missing a lot of typical test scores that we used to try and ballpark their ability. Don't worry, it was a ballpark. We didn't make major decisions until we actually had a chance to talk to and work with a student for a bit. I thought, that's fine, I'll just do some one-on-one with Kevin and see what's up. One-on-one with Kevin was like conversing with someone who'd forgotten everything in a freak, if not impossible, amnesia accident. There was no evidence that he had learned anything past the 2nd grade, and now he was in the 9th grade. Flabbergasted, I figured we needed to get more serious with this. If he was going to be in my class, I needed to know why and how. I decided to meet with him, his guidance counselor, his parents, and another teacher to see what was really going on. This is where it all became clear. It was by some incredible fluke that his family hadn't been wiped off the face of the earth years ago. Odds are his entire heritage was based on blind luck and some type of sick divine intervention that saves his family every time a threat presents itself. Kevin was the genetic pinnacle of this null achievement. Even my instructional lead, a woman who could find a redeeming trait in a Balrog, failed to see any reason this kid or his family should be alive today. So here's a list of events that made it abundantly clear that God exists and he's laughing uncontrollably. Kevin frequently forgot when and where class was. On more than one occasion, I had to retrieve him from other classrooms. Kevin ate an entire 24-pack of crayons, puked, and then did it again the next day. This is 9th grade. I have no idea where he got crayons. Kevin's dad wrote tuition checks and mailed them to me, his English teacher. This was a public school. When I gave it back to Kevin, voided, to give to his dad with a brief note explaining that this is a public school, Kevin got in trouble for trying to spend it at a 7-Eleven after school. Kevin was removed from the culinary arts program after leaving a cutting board on the gas stove and starting a fire. Twice. Kevin threw his lunch at the school resource officer and tried to run away. He ran into a door and insisted it wasn't him. Kevin stole my phone during class. I called it. It rang. He denied it was ringing. Not that it wasn't his, not that he did it, no, he denied that the phone was actually ringing. He tried 3 times before the end of the year. Kevin called the female basketball coach a mother-flipping B-word during gym. Basketball tryouts were that afternoon. Kevin tried out. It didn't go well. Kevin's mum could never remember which school he went to. She missed several meetings because she drove to other schools, none of which he ever went to. Kevin tased himself in the neck before a football game. Kevin kept a bottle of orange Kool-Aid in his backpack for about 4 months. He thought it would turn into alcohol. He drank it during homeroom and threw up. Kevin said the N-word a lot. Kevin was white. The high school was 84% black. Kevin got beat up a lot. Kevin stole another student's iPhone and tried to sell it back to them. Kevin didn't understand that his grade was dependent on tests, quizzes, homework, classwork, and participation. Kevin finished his first semester with a 3% average. He tried to bribe me with $11. Kevin spit on a girl and said, "You should get out of those wet clothes." The girl was the Spanish student teacher. Kevin didn't know dogs and cats were different animals. Kevin tried to download adult flicks onto a computer in the library, at the circulation desk, while he was logged on. Kevin asked a girl to prom, he was in the 9th grade and freshmen don't go to prom, by asking for her phone number and then texting her his address. Kevin got gum in his hair constantly. Kevin regularly tried to cheat on assignments by knocking the pile over, grabbing one before I had picked them all up, and then writing his name on it wherever there was room. Kevin had several allergies, but neither his parents nor he could remember what they were. They were very concerned that the holiday party, it's high school, we don't have those, would have peanuts. When they finally got a doctor's note, he was allergic to amoxicillin. Kevin and his parents took a trip to Nassau. How the F did they even get airline tickets? And forgot all their luggage at home. I didn't believe him when he told me until I talked to his mum, who told me first thing when I saw her at the bi-weekly meeting. Kevin's grandfather apparently died in a chainsaw accident. I can only assume God was looking the other way that day. Folks, I would be ashamed to tell you how many takes that story took me because I was just laughing so much. Oh, Kevin, I can only hope that your savings of $11 from the rejected bribe afforded you some small comfort in your life after school. In the last few weeks before the AP exam, I gave my classes a series of practice tests, written by College Board, to take in class under a time constraint to give them practice. One student, let's call him Bill, always tried to cheat in my class. I'd gotten sick of putting in the effort to catch him, and it didn't matter because the entire point of the class was to prepare for the AP exam. Bill started off each test by staring at the page and answering 1 or 2 questions. Then, as always, he asked to go to the bathroom during the test. I let him go and he took his phone, of course. He returns and frantically bubbles in the rest of the test and turns it in early. I have to hand it to him. Bill was great at memorizing letters for the answers of the practice tests, but he failed the AP exam. This isn't really the kid's fault, more the parents', but my sister teaches in Hong Kong, generally 3 to 4-year-olds. And she had this one kid, called Enzo, if I remember right, who kept acting out, completely ignoring my sister and her TA when they spoke to him, and doing badly in the classwork they're given. He also didn't speak, at all, tended to play by himself. So my sister called in his parents to discuss it, voiced her concerns that there might be behavioral problems, maybe something deeper seated. His parents then confided in her that it's probably not that. More that the kid didn't speak a lick of English or Cantonese, i.e., the two languages used in the school and most of Hong Kong. They were both relatively affluent Italians, so they'd raised the kid speaking Italian and lied that he spoke English fluently so he could get admitted into the school, as it was a requirement that they had to have a basic understanding, if I recall correctly. My sister raised her concerns with the principal after she had the meeting, and they responded by just moving the kid to another class. She said she still sees him sitting alone during lunch breaks. I really feel for the kid though. He's only young, and he's pretty much been alienated and won't learn properly, because his parents are so dead set on shoving him into the most expensive school, assuming that he'll learn well. Not a teacher, but in one of my health and sex ed classes, a girl in my class said she wasn't afraid of getting AIDS, because if she got it, she'd just give it to someone else, and therefore not have it anymore. Yeah, that was an interesting day once we realized she was serious. A university freshman turned in a paper on the Treaty of Versailles that conformed to no known formatting system I had ever seen. There didn't even seem to be paragraphs. Assuming that his computer had jumbled it up somehow when he turned it in, I went to give it back to him in class one day so he could fix it. He informed me it was intentional. The format meant that the paper was meant to be read as a rap, which he proceeded to do for me in the few minutes before class started. It was incredible. D+. I always thought that Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton was truly a musical beyond reproach. I now see that he may have caused some issues in the schooling system. Okay, so I had a student in middle school that couldn't read. That wasn't a huge deal. Kid had issues. Once he got angry at me and told me he was going to rip off my buttons. It may have been literal or figurative. Didn't matter. Remember, issues. It was my job to teach him to read. He should have already been in high school. He was 14 and in middle school. I worked individually with this kid every day. Finally, I just asked him what he was going to do for a living, if he couldn't read and wouldn't try. He gave me a pretty standard answer. I'll play basketball or sell drugs. I should mention that he was barely over 5 foot tall. I worried about him. He was my student for 2 years. Eventually, he moved on and I switched high school. So 20 years later, I got curious. I remember most of my students, and this kid had a name that stood out a bit. I Google his name, hoping he won't be in prison. A lot of my former students are. I find him right away. He's a professional basketball player. For Ukraine. Retired now, but still, good for him. Made himself proud. As a note, he turned 15 in middle school. He did learn how to read. He graduated and went to college. Apparently he struggled for a while, but he's human. His history was not ideal. I'm concerned about naming him because of his privacy. He played from 2006 to 2010. One of the fellas in my university first-year computer programming class stared at the wall. The same spot. The whole class. Every class. He'd walk in on time, sit down, open his folder, and stare at the wall, and didn't ever take a note that I saw. At the end of the wall-staring duration of the class, he'd close his likely still blank folder, get up, and leave without a word. I see him from time to time at the grocery store, collecting up the carts. I feel a little bad for whoever funded his education, but am pleased that he has a steady job. My 8th grade physical science lab partner took the top off one of those oil burners, poured the oil all over our desk, and then lit it on fire. Like on purpose. Did you think it would be less flammable because it's on the table now? Hilariously, even though I was the one who put the fire out and had nothing to do with lighting it, I still got suspended too. I guess the lesson I was supposed to learn was never help put out a fire. Here's one from my mum. The class ate at one of those medieval-themed restaurants on a field trip, and one little brat took advantage of the setting and the overflowing cleavage. He referred to the waitress as his wench, and demanded that she butter his bread, all so she would bend over to better reveal her bountiful bosom. He ordered the turkey legs, then wielded them theatrically like Henry VIII, while thanking the waitress for giving him a bone. When my mum got home, she said he was a sexual harassment lawsuit waiting to happen. I'm late, but I have a winner. The class was an applied math course for high schoolers, and we held a paper airplane design contest. The rule was that you could use anything on the table to make your airplane, and that the person who threw theirs the furthest down the hallway would win. The table had all manner of things on it: printer paper, construction paper, tape, rulers, compasses, toothpicks, duct tape, paper clips, masking tape, a stapler, and even Elmer's glue. Well, the class went to work and for an hour designed some very interesting airplanes. Except for Tim. Tim sat quietly and chatted with his friends until about 30 seconds were left to build. Then he went up to the table, grabbed a few things, and sat back down to wait. When it came time to throw, it turned out that his airplane was a piece of paper wrapped around the stapler, while the lighter and more complex planes drifted to the side and landed early or hit the hallway walls. Tim's plane slammed straight into the door on the other side of the hall, with a satisfying clunk. Tim's ridiculous creation beat everyone else out and won the contest easily, while technically obeying the rules of the competition. I hope that guy ends up working for NASA. My other favorite student was a kid who ate a glue stick for $5. He figured it was edible because it said non-toxic. Technically correct, but so wrong. He had to go home due to the uncontrollable vomiting. I'm not sure if he was ever paid the $5. My third favorite was a middle schooler whose mum was dissed by another student in class. His reaction, not having any decent weapons on him, was to rip out the 3-ring part of a 3-ring binder and use the prongs to attack the other student's forearm. Unfortunately, that kid isn't going anywhere but juvie unless he can help with his anger issues. Too bad, because it was an ingenious improvised weapon, and he probably could have used that creativity some other way. Kindergarten teacher. Testing students on community helpers, asked a student to name 3 community helpers. Child responds, "Firefighter man." Now I really thought, yes, she's got this in the bag. A hot dog. And a monkey. No. Kiss your brain, though. Blatant and low-effort plagiarism. Like it's literally the first Google result if you search topic, example essay. But they add their name in a different font and size, which should make it obvious at a glance, as if the use of capitalization and punctuation wasn't a dead giveaway that they didn't write it. I had a student pull that last year, while his even dumber buddy didn't even put his name in it. In fact, it wasn't even an essay, it was a selection of question prompts. Basically, 2 Kevins in one class. I also had a kid at the very end of the day continually F around with his skateboard and become very hostile when I insisted on holding it until the last bell. He ran out the door, jumped on it, and promptly fell and broke his jaw. His parents then threatened to sue the school because he got hurt there doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. Oh, this is a great one. Twice this week, the same student brought a popsicle in to have as a snack for lunch. Needless to say, he was very disappointed. His mum might actually pack his lunch. Blatant, low-effort plagiarism is not exclusive to younger students. Look forward to it all the way through university. As for the popsicle kid, that seems like another case of neglectful parenting. Been a history teacher for 3 months and was teaching about the Middle Colonies and how it was the breadbasket of America. The next day as a warm-up, I ask what the breadbasket is. She rose her hand without her even skipping a beat and starts going off about how I'm so dumb because it's called the chicken basket, where you get your tenders, 2 sides, and it also comes with bread, but that isn't what it's called. This poor girl has a lot more stories. This is just the one that stands out to me the most. Other stories include wondering how Obama was the first black president because she also thought Abraham Lincoln was black. Her reasoning behind it all was that he was really, really tall. Granted, she's also black, so yeah. Along with that, I've had to explain that we did have color back then. She couldn't believe that people before the 1950s still had color as the only TVs and photos were black and white. She constantly calls people cockatoos. 3 weeks ago, she asked which history I'm teaching. I honestly don't know if I really suck as a teacher or if it's her. Mind you guys, I do teach 8th grade US history. I wanted to believe all kids are smart, but I'm just slowly not going to hold on to that belief anymore. These are the highlights. Ask again next year and I'll have stories from multiple kids. I want to reap in that sweet, sweet karma. Not a teacher, but I work as a bouncer, and on Saturday some girl was persistently trying to get into my bar, but looked young and didn't have ID with her. After telling her no about 30 times and her complaining about everyone hating on her, a guy walked in and told us he's one of her high school teachers and that she's 17. She took off awfully quick when he showed up, and I can only imagine how things went in school today. I once had a couple of exchange students steal from my store when I was managing a Lids. They walked out the store and we followed closely after them. We turned the corner and they were stopped talking to their teacher. We patiently waited while they finished talking to the teacher, all while getting strange looks from him. He started to walk away, and we immediately tell the kids we need the hats they stole, to which they replied, "We will give them back, but we can do it somewhere else. That's our teacher." Like I was going to cut them a break after they stole. Teacher notices that there is a problem and comes back and absolutely laid into them, telling them they were going to go to jail and get expelled. We had no intent of pressing charges, they were only around 15 and stole 2 hats, but my God, if that teacher didn't put the fear of God into them. It turns out they were spoiled rich kids from another country who actually had the money to pay but thought stealing would be cooler. We ended up getting a call from the school. They had to write an apology letter for us and they had to do 30 hours of volunteer work for the charity of our choice. They threatened to shut down the school's exchange program because of them as well, but I never heard of what came of it after that. Worked with 3-year-olds. One was crying and pointing at another kid, so I asked what happens. She mostly speaks Spanish but understands English, so I started asking her, "Are you hurt?" "Yes." "Did she hit you?" "Yes." "Did she kick you?" "Yes." Then the other child chimes in, "Nuh-uh, I didn't kick her, I just punched her in the face." My sister is a teacher from a local school. Like many great teachers, she's also responsible for a form group. In this case, a rowdy and rambunctious group of 15-year-olds she'd inherited from a newly retired teacher. Some kids stand out more than others, and not always for the right reasons. The epitome of that rule existed in my sister's form group. She had the misfortune to be called Xena by her Tumblr feminist mother, and Xena herself had followed firmly in her mother's footsteps. She was considered unpopular, and certainly the other kids were unfair and cruel, but she didn't help matters herself. My sister has told many stories of Xena, up to and including the time she spontaneously began speaking in an accent, which sounded like the illegitimate offspring of a Pakistani accent, Irish, and a speech impediment. The accent vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared over the course of the lunch hour. The time she claimed the powers of clairvoyance in chemistry. The kid torching pencils with a Bunsen burner apparently never particularly cared if their great-aunt Doreen wanted to warn them of misfortune. The time she shaved her head and refused to wear her uniform because it was stifling her creativity. The John Cena meme was in full swing, and Xena had earned the nickname owing to her buzz cut and unfortunate head shape. Kids would hum his theme tune upon seeing Xena in the school. A memo was sent around the faculty concerning the matter, but half of the staff were convinced that John Cena was a politician. My sister was running improvisation drills when Xena broke in with one of her prime stories. She was the daughter of a Mauritian man named Jonathan, she said. Her skin was the color of milk, smooth and pale. Jonathan was a man of great importance. She had been born in Mauritius and swiftly smuggled over to the UK with her mother, as a newborn. Born and raised in England, by the way. There was a beat of stunned, awkward silence until a particular crapbag of a child screeched, "John Cena!" and slammed his mate's head into the desk.
What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've ever seen? My roommate refused to go with his family for spring break since there wasn't a flight with first class seats and only business class was available. He ended up taking the connecting flight that did have first class available while the rest of his family just took business on the direct flight. You gotta be comfortable, you know, business class, the new cattle class. Wouldn't exactly call it rich kid syndrome, but it took me a little while to get used to my GF's lifestyle. I grew up in a very working class family, with both parents working full time just for us to stay afloat. Went around my GF's house and saw a lady making food in the kitchen. "You must be Mrs. Surname." Trying to be really polite, and I introduced myself to her family. That was actually their maid. It was awkward. Luckily, they're all really down to earth and stuff, cause turns out that her parents were basically homeless and living out of a storage space when they were my age. But her parents started up a little business and actually became really successful enough to support them. And they just kept growing. That makes sense. People who come from humble beginnings often turn out to become decent people when and if they get rich. The maid comment reminded me of this moment when I was traveling with my friends. For some context, I was the only Latino in the group of my mostly white friends, and on this trip we stayed at another friend's family's house. We woke up to an older Mexican woman cooking breakfast. She turned out to be their maid/cook, and this friend's mother said, "Oh my God, have you ever tried homemade tortillas? They are the best." My white friend slowly turns his head over to me, then back to the mom and says, "I'm pretty sure he has." I just smiled and she felt super embarrassed. It was a funny moment and she was super nice. The dude who relentlessly bullied me in school was also the son of one of the richest people in the city. One day a teacher caught him with his hands around my throat and I was pinned against a wall. We were both taken to the teacher's meeting room where it was explained to me that we should try to get along and that we should apologize to each other. Did I mention his dad also built the flashy new cafeteria for the school that year? He was caught on numerous occasions with me in some state of distress, and every time they found a way to make it both our problem. His dad pumped a lot of money into that school. He also flew his friends on his private airline to Manchester United games, so nobody stood up for me because they could lose their privileges. My saving grace was a lot of his mates in the early years of secondary school turned on him in the later years because he was such a jerk. But as you might tell, I'm still not over it. I feel this because I worked at a place that gave other people more chances than they deserved because that person knew people at the company. It's a crappy feeling when you get mistreated and no one has your back. Attended an international high school in Ho Chi Minh City where a lot of new wave millionaire kids live. The school was ridiculous, and a third of the kids were expats, perfectly lovely kids, and a third were local Vietnamese kids whose parents were working their butt offs to send them to this private school, and the other third were the millionaire kids. They would never hesitate to show off their mummy and daddy's wealth. They'd pull up to school in their Lamborghinis, Ferraris, etc. And if their Rolls Royce didn't come on time to pick them up from school, it would be a straight phone call to their other driver to come pick me up right now. They'd be such jerks 24/7 to the non-rich locals and constantly just bring up the most trivial things and complain about them. I'm literally not exaggerating here when I say this example. My maid bought me the wrong Louis Vuitton bag. I told her it was the tan brown one, not the light brown one. Ugh, I can't believe it. Now we have to send her on the jet to Shanghai to get another one. They all paid and used family connections to get into Harvard, Stanford, UPenn, etc. And even now constantly complain on Facebook and Instagram about how crap their resident hall food was. So they just hired some freaking personal chef or something. Mind you, these kids were the dumbest bunch I've ever seen. One of them literally was so clueless about the most basic facts, but still got into business management. Despised the lot of them. Glad I'm in Europe, far away from most of them. When I was in high school, if you just had a car that worked, you were popular. Group of rich high school kids in Montana out driving around, drinking. Found 2 combines, large farm tractor thingies, worth about $250,000 each, out in a wheat field. Decided to have a demolition derby. Got caught in the judge's chambers with the farmers who just wanted the damages reimbursed. The high-end family lawyers asked what the hell they were thinking when they did that. The response? Well, you can't put a price on a good time. Turns out that was the wrong answer. Man, this story ended on a cliffhanger. Did they go to jail? Did their family end up paying? I get enough incomplete stories from my anime. I don't need it on Reddit too. He was 25 when I knew him. His father owned the oil fields. He had credit cards that he used for anything and everything, that they paid the balance off every month. He never even kept track of what was charged on it. He just bought whatever caught his fancy. He openly and shamelessly admitted that he had offered his college professors money to give him passing grades. One day he was cranky about something and said, "I wish my parents would just die so I could have their money. Why should I have to wait?" Sounds like his parents should find out how he really feels and leave him with just $1 in the will. Back in high school, we were doing one of those icebreakers where you passed the beach ball around and whoever caught it had to answer the question their thumb landed on. Well, this kid who had proclaimed being rich numerous times before, talking about his parents owning a known pizza place and how he drives expensive sports cars, caught the ball, and his question was, if you won $1 million, what would you do with it? His response was somewhere along the lines of, $1 million wouldn't make any difference in my life. Thanks a lot, Brad. You just ruined the game. Stupid Brad, always messing things up. I once had a mom ask if I could open the back of our ambulance so her kid could see what was inside since he wanted to be a fireman. I'm a medic, not a firefighter. I agree as long as he doesn't touch anything. Of course, the second the door opens, the kid hops in and goes straight for our expensive monitor. I tell him no, that it's dangerous and it could break, to which he starts screaming, "I don't care, my mom will buy it." And the mom says, "It's fine, just let him play with it. If it breaks, I'll replace it." I had to physically pick him up and carry him out of the ambulance since she didn't try to control him. While this is happening, we get paged out for a call, and this lady suggests that she could pay double our hourly rate if we just stay for a few more minutes, just so her little punk could explore/destroy more of our equipment. Get the hell out of here with that crap, lady. You're willing to delay an ambulance so you won't have to deal with your precious little Joey's tantrum? Unbelievable. What would have been funny is if the kid used the shock panels and he flew out of the ambulance. A very distant relative of ours, some weird branch off the family tree, offered her son a bribe of an entire apartment building if he finished his undergraduate accounting degree. I just went, huh? So you get an immediate investment after graduating and you can rent out a place for mega dollars? My significant other has a rich aunt and uncle with only one kid. When he graduated college, his gift was a complex that brings in enough money for this kid to retire on. But if you ask him, he's self-made. I will never understand how rich kids can claim to be self-made. Maybe it's them just wanting to try and fit in. I don't know about rich, but just spoiled. My cousin insisted on a $15,000 wedding ring and a $30,000 wedding. She and the groom made $25,000 a year combined. Her dad paid for everything. They divorced within 6 months. Looks like she wanted a wedding, not a marriage. I have a kid in my MBA cohort that outsources his work and projects to India. He barked and moaned when one of our professors gave him a C when he only showed up to 2 classes after his dad donated $10,000 to the school. Overall nice guy, but doesn't have a clue. Had this one kid who dramatically threw down his smartphone on the ground in a mock frustration. Broken phone was replaced with few to no questions. I did that, but with an old flip phone so it didn't break. Got a few laughs when the battery flew out, and more when I picked it back up and it still worked. I chucked it halfway across the football field once, and that thing stayed intact. I went to middle/elementary school with some very wealthy people. Typically, I was oblivious enough to not realize it, but 2 instances come to mind. In 5th grade, we did an exchange trip type of thing with some kids in Canada. On the flight over there, one of the classmates said, "Wow, this is crazy. I've only ever flown first class before." Later, in 8th grade, I was at the same kid's house, an absolute mansion on top of a hill with the long landscaping entrance driveway, marbled floor entrance hall with stairs winding up either side, etc. And he and a girl, who had been dropped off in her dad's newer Ferrari, started having a discussion comparing the merits of their relatives' in-home movie theaters. Like, not just a living room with a cool AV setup, but full-on movie theaters with road seatings that could fit about 50 people. My family wasn't poor, but that was when I realized that we weren't rich either. I deliver pizzas in a very rich area. I'm talking seeing Rolls Royces and supercars on a daily basis kind of rich. My manager told me a story of someone that used to work there. This guy would deliver pizzas in a brand new BMW M3 and just put absolutely no effort into his job. Delivering pizzas isn't hard. Apparently this guy only had a job because his parents wouldn't pay his allowance if he didn't work. How much was his allowance, you ask? $5,000 a month. This guy was making $60,000 a year to deliver pizzas part-time. That's actually super common in wealthy families. An acquaintance of mine has the same deal with his parents. Work 40 hours a week and get $100,000 a year in allowance plus $15,000 a month for the mortgage being paid. Excuse me, $100,000 allowance? No wonder rich kids are out of touch. Brought my college roommate to my mom's house for Thanksgiving because he lived in a different state and I was only 15 minutes from campus. I gave him a quick tour of our house and he was astonished how clean it was. My mom's a neat freak and keeps a very clean house. He then said to my mom, "Wow, you guys must have a really good maid service." I've never seen my mom laugh that hard before. 2 girls, both nice and fairly level-headed, but also just raised too damn rich. One would take a taxi everywhere in town. It was a very safe small college town with the free campus buses, and she'd taxi across campus. She lived 2 blocks away from me and would take a taxi from her dorm to my house. Google Maps says it's a full 4-minute walk. She swore she had a terrible sense of direction and couldn't figure out where we lived. But you would think after that first embarrassingly short taxi ride, she'd throw on her address in Google Maps and just walk. The other would regularly complain about how not knowing how to manage their money. It took a while to figure out, But it eventually clicked that she meant very poor people didn't know how to invest their money in stocks and bonds. Then one day we were having a conversation where she revealed that she didn't think a house in Detroit in 2010 could possibly cost under $1 million. I told her I grew up in a nice $180K home and she thought I was dumb or lying. I shattered her world when I showed her my house on Zillow. When she graduated college, she complained about how much stuff cost all the time. It was nice seeing her learn the value of a dollar finally. What do you think made the second girl finally come around? Was it just enough times of colliding with the real world? Her parents stopped paying her way after she got a job. She was probably making $70,000 to $80,000 in her first job, but she was living in Pasadena. She talked all the time about how poor she was and how she was living in an apartment above a garage. But at the time, I lived in an apartment with 5 other people and felt pretty wealthy, making $11 an hour. So I wasn't exactly heartbroken for her. Went to college with a totally chill dude who was apparently rich as freak. He was on our college golf team and enjoyed destroying a club if he hit a bad shot. He wasn't even angry, it was just like a reflex to go Bo Jackson over his knee or whatever. I asked him how he keeps playing and he basically said after every round he would just buy brand new clubs. He showed me in the trunk of his car that he had like 5 boxes of irons and always took the plastic off a new driver for every round. And he played every day at least 18 if not 36 holes. He said it wasn't even a rounding error in his dad's credit card. Jesus, I play golf and my golf clubs are really nice and custom fit to me, but that's because my dad is a PGA member and we get a sweet wholesale price. I can't imagine getting them replaced every day without it hurting, or even replacing them every year like some do. Kid in my high school crashed 6 cars within a year, and they weren't like 90s Toyotas and Hondas like most high schoolers have. These were brand new Subaru STIs, a BRZ, a BMW, brand new Jeep, stuff like that. The last car his dad bought him was a semi-new Ford Focus, a decent car, better than my 1997 white Camry. Every day he complained and threw a fit that his dad wouldn't buy him another $30,000+ car. Must be nice, I'm over here worrying about an oil leak on my car and the repair costs. I work with this guy. He recently proposed to a girl he dated for a few weeks with a $5K ring. He's 19 and we make less than $30,000 a year. They were married a month later. One of the kids in my grade bought bags of angel dust to senior prom. Not only did his parents let him go, the police did too. Now I believe he's in engineering program at Yale. A kid that used to work for me came in work super pissed off one day. I asked him what was wrong, to which he replied, "My freaking maid didn't make my bed again, and my dad still won't fire her." I used to work for a family that had a cleaning lady every other day. None of the kids made their own beds, made their own food, washed their own dishes, hell, never even loaded a dishwasher. They just left them on the table for someone else to pick up. They had never done their own laundry either. When the son had football practice, I watched a teenage boy have a goddamn meltdown, sobbing and cursing about their maid for not throwing his uniform into the wash, and he didn't know how to do it himself. Their 2 oldest are about to have a very interesting freshman year in college. When I was in college, I roomed with a girl like this. Her mom did everything for her to the point where she couldn't function like a normal adult. Like her mom would drive 11 hours to clean this woman's room for her, clean up her used pee-pee wrappers, etc. Her mom would get really snarky with me like a self-reliance was a loser quality. Also because it made her daughter look bad. While it was really easy to learn to wash your own clothes, etc., she couldn't do it and just said, "Oh, well, I won't have to. When I graduate, I'm gonna get a high-paying job and have everything done for me. I wasn't raised to be a domestic like you." Fun fact, I wasn't raised that way. I did my own cooking and laundry because my mom couldn't bother to do anything but watch soap operas and Lifetime movies. Fast forward to present day, guess who couldn't hack taking care of herself after college and had to move back in with her mom? This was all of my college roommates. They couldn't do laundry, pick up after themselves, clean dishes, or make themselves a freaking sandwich. The ones whose parents lived close by, their mommies would come and clean up their room and do their laundry. Came back from a music festival in Southeast Asia, got VIP tickets. I swear, this isn't about me. One of the other festival goers is a 20-something-year-old Asian girl who looks like she's straight out of that movie Crazy Rich Asians. This chick had a photographer following her around snapping pictures or posing in front of the stage with various acts, getting in the way of other people trying to dance. She asked security if she could get them to clear a section for her so she could get an unobstructed view of the stage for better photos. She bought a couple of bottles, 6 in total, for her table and again had the photographer take incredible photos of her posing with the bottles. She was incredibly rude to the waitstaff, snapping her fingers and in general talking to them like they were lower class citizens. She asked my mate and I, both Westerners, to hang with her and her mates at her table, and again had the photographer take photos of her posing with us at the table. The other 2 guys from the group, both Asian, approached us when they saw that we were at this table, and it looked like we had made some new friends. When they approached us, the girl and her friends got quiet, spoke amongst themselves in Indonesian, and basically shooed them away. We went with them after they did that and walked over to our friends. One of the guys is Indonesian, and he told us that she basically told them to get lost and know their place. I can confirm that this definitely happens in Indonesia. I lived there for a number of years, and the racial and financial segregation is nothing like any other country or culture I know. I traveled there with a Filipino friend of mine. He looks Filipino and sounds and acts Aussie. He dresses very well. I dress very casually. In all of the stores we went into, if it wasn't apparent that we were traveling together, he would have the staff members follow him around. In one store, I was invited to try a $40,000 watch on. I let the staff members know I had no intention of making a purchase, but they insisted that I give it a try. He was told they do not allow people to try on watches. Interesting place. I know a girl who comes from a multi-million-dollar family. She's made several blog posts about how she and her significant other were broke, spent the year living really lavishly, and that they were going to end up on the street because there was no place to live available in their price range. And she genuinely wanted to end herself. Turns out what she meant is that there wasn't anywhere available above the normal rent rate. Ended up in a top floor penthouse. Guess daddy came through? Neither of them work. Man, this story just straight annoyed me. My boss bought her kids a $2 million house to live in while they went to college. My boss also paid for their college. So of course, they moved out of the $2 million house 5 months later because they wanted to be independent. Oh yeah, and expected mommy and daddy to pay for their rent, utilities, college, cars, vacations to see friends in different states, etc. I would just stay in the $2 million house. Maybe start a crayfish farm in the backyard to help pay for the house. Crayfish racers will pay a lot of money for a fast crawl, Dad. Crayfish racing reminds me of Filthy Frank. Friend in college literally went to the local GameStop at midnight every Tuesday. He'd buy every new release for every console. We went over to his house one time that year, and he had about 60-ish games that were unopened. One time we were walking around campus and he stopped by the ATM. He got his receipt and called his dad. Turns out his dad was worried his funds were running low, so he sent him $25,000 just to make sure he wasn't going to starve. Had a friend in high school whose dad wasn't involved. He was raised middle class like myself and lived with his mom and stepdad. After high school, he worked towards becoming an electrician and was saving for his first apartment. His dad eventually came around when he was right out of high school and started giving him money here and there when he needed it. His dad owned a large company on the East Coast and was a multi-millionaire. Soon his dad convinced him to quit his trade work and gave him a job at his business. Shortly after, he was promoted to a managerial position that he wasn't qualified for, and paid way too much. He'd just get wasted while on conference calls and nobody questioned him since he was the boss's son. His dad bought him his first home, almost $500,000, and multiple cars. He took up horse racing and we quickly had nothing in common. Gone were the days of dumb teenage stuff, going fishing, hiking, playing video games together. He quickly found a girlfriend whose dad was also a multimillionaire. She was 30 and still putting everything on daddy's credit card. I couldn't keep up with their lifestyle and very quickly we faded as friends. After his girlfriend and him broke up, she told me that he was actually severely depressed and almost drove his car off a bridge multiple times. Deep down, he was having issues with wanting to live up to his dad's lifestyle and standards, but losing his old friends in life. It's too bad. I haven't seen him in probably 4 years now. We tried to reconnect a few times, but it just doesn't work anymore. Man, that's really sad. It's like his dad wanted to make up for the neglect with money. It's stories like these that tell you that money corrupts people. It's like all those YouTubers that got famous when they were really young, and a lot of them have just disappeared now, because they're probably broke.
When was your last, I've got to get the hell out of here moment? It was years ago when I was in 4th grade. My parents used to get into fights all the time, especially when my dad was drinking. They'd start yelling and that would turn into actual fistfights. At this time, we were living in a small trailer, and the room I shared with all 3 of my siblings was the one at the end of the trailer, near the back door. So my dad comes home drunk, Mum is angry and starts yelling, and it escalates from there. Being on a small trailer, everything sounds so close and terrifying, and as the oldest of the 4, I felt the need to protect my siblings, but I didn't know what to do. After a while, my mum starts screaming my name at the top of her lungs, and I can still hear my dad screaming too, and I knew that I needed to get myself and my siblings out of there ASAP. I ushered them out of the room, down the hallway, and out the back door, and told them to head to our aunt's place, who lived a few trailers down. My mum was still screaming for me, and all I knew to do was yell, "I got them out, Mum! We're leaving!" before also going out the back to my aunt's. I don't recall ever being that scared. Cops came, and they both went to jail and were both out in a couple of days, and acted like nothing had ever happened. A few years ago, I brought the incident up to my mum. I told her that I thought she was screaming at me to get the siblings out of the house, and that's why I had. She told me she was screaming my name because she was scared and wanted help, and didn't know who else to call for. I felt so bad because I didn't help her, but there's really not much I could have done. I worked in a factory that made large plastic items via filling molds with powder and sending into a giant industrial oven that turned to 550 degrees Fahrenheit. At the end of the week, I was cleaning said oven and my boss, not knowing I was inside, turned it on. At the sound of hydraulic doors closing, I dove out of the oven as they closed and avoided free cremation. I both got the hell out of that oven and that company pretty quick. In the fall, I was walking down the trail in the woods during the middle of the day. A raccoon was sitting in the middle of the trail facing us, sitting on its butt, head kind of lowered, bugs buzzing all around it. It didn't move at all. It just stared at us. We decided to turn around. I don't know what rabies looks like, but that's not how I want to find out. On the New York City subway, I watched a grown man pull his pants down and use the support rod in the middle of the train as leverage to take a wicked, steamy dump while making aggressive eye contact with me and a few other passengers. Hey, when you gotta go, you gotta go, man. I gave my ex a ride to his court hearing for hitting my daughter. I pointed out to him that inside there was a sign that said no cell phones, and that I would run our phones out to the car and be right back. I felt like my heart was going to break my sternum, and I had tunnel vision as I had called my sister and told her I needed her and her husband to come with their pickup truck to my house right now because I had a small window to get as much of my daughter's and my possessions out of my house before he was released from court. Just as we were wrapping up, I saw him running down the street like Usain Bolt right for me. I yelled for them to drop what they had and get in the truck and go. Just as I close my car door, he runs and tries to smash it open. I fumble with my keys to get the engine started. He then stands in front of my car, blocking my path. I dismissed my burning desire to run him over and threw it in reverse and smashed the gas pedal down the block to the next street. I'd like to say things got better after that, but that was just the beginning of the worst year of my life. Now I'm past all of that and living a better life. I was at a marketing recruitment presentation in college, and this guy started talking about how we would be able to go to Disneyland and buy Ferraris if we just signed up for his exclusive elite program. We just had to make a small down payment right there in the auditorium, and we shouldn't talk about it with friends or family because haters online had damaged the company's reputation. It was Amway, and the guy was Charlie D'Urso. Was in New Orleans interviewing for a job that required driving a company vehicle 10 hours a day that had valuable specialty equipment. Interview was going great and we get to the part about pay. Guy goes, "We can offer you $10 an hour." A big smile came over my face and I leaned over to shake his hand. He thought I was agreeing. I was telling him bye. Popeyes pays around $15 an hour here. My mum was content living with bedbugs, a creepy 50-year-old man who might pay our bills, as well as his kids and our cousins, all in a crappy mobile home that she hadn't been making payments on. It was in such bad shape, it wasn't even worth repossessing. I could never have any time to myself. I was always surrounded by bratty kids while constantly scratching at the bite marks the bugs had left. I'd go to bed at night wearing sweats with socks on hot nights just to try and keep the damn bugs off me. It didn't work. When I was around 14, I went to go live with my grandma. Of course, that made me a backstabber in the eyes of my mum, but she's not relevant in my life anymore. I pulled into a gas station to fill up my car at 4 a.m. on the way to work. The station was well lit and actually pretty busy, so I didn't feel unsafe. I pulled up next to a pump, got out, and just when I put the nozzle in, I heard someone trying to get my attention. He asked if I could call his girlfriend to come pick him up. I called one number, voicemail box full. He gave me a second number, mailbox also full. Then he asked if I had jumper cables and if I could give him a jump. I agreed, thinking the van he was nearby was his vehicle. Then, after I agree, he tells me the story of how he got there. According to him, his car had broken down at another gas station up the street. He said it was closed, so he couldn't get any help. So he borrowed a bike from someone and rode it down to this gas station. Then he went into the gas station to leave the bike there. As soon as he started walking away, my brain started racing and pointing out all the things that didn't add up about the story. First, all I could imagine in those voicemail boxes were a bunch of people going, "Your boyfriend is stuck at a gas station." Then I thought about how in the hell he would legitimately borrow a bike from someone at a closed gas station, in the middle of night, in the middle of winter. At that point, I decided it was time to get the F out of there. Thankfully, I hadn't pumped any gas yet, so I quickly put it back on the pump, got in my car, and tore out of there. I actually felt a little bad because what if he actually needed help? But then I reminded myself about him borrowing a bike in that situation, how he was trying to get me to a dark, secluded secondary location. This dude was absolutely trying to rob and murder me. I was visiting London and just got out of a sports bar by myself at 3 a.m, drunk as crap. I decide to walk from the bar, near Leicester Square, to my hotel, near King's Cross, despite not knowing exactly where I am or how to get to the hotel. I start walking in a direction, and within a minute I'm walking down a rather wide shopping street, when I see two bald guys coming the other way, both pretty much built brick crap houses, and looking like they want to start crap. They hadn't spotted me yet, but one guy suddenly walks to the side of the street and just flat out punches the steel grate in the front of a shop entrance as hard as he can. I pretty much did a straight 180, double-timed it back to the bar, and asked the nice bouncers to get me a cab. Cab drops me off right in front of the hotel, and I go to bed without getting the crap kicked out of me first. Although it's entirely reasonable that those large, shaven-headed gentlemen were simply steel-grate integrity enthusiasts, I don't blame you for noping the heck on out of there. I go to school in Poughkeepsie. One time my friends and I were walking along some train tracks by the river on a foggy night. Not smart. We could barely see 5 feet ahead, but we weren't afraid because it was a popular hangout spot. All of a sudden, we hear a loud barking and a flipping crackhead lunges out of the fog at us, barking like a dog. The fog around him cleared up and we could see more druggies lying under some leaves by the side of the tracks, watching us and laughing. Never ran so fast or came so close to crapping my pants in my life. When my now ex-husband called me to tell me the reason he was late for dinner was because he was arrested for pleasuring himself in public, I got out. I'm too old for that crap. My husband came home from a business trip early yesterday and failed to mention it to me. I heard someone jiggling the doorknob and sprinted out the back door. Not getting murdered in my own house. This was like 5 years ago. I was 24 years old, got way too drunk at my local bar, and ended up going back to this guy's apartment. It was decorated by someone's grandmother for sure. There were candelabras everywhere. He lit all of them. Then he sat me on the couch and proceeded to go through all of these old family photo albums, specifically looking at pictures of his siblings and cousins as children. No joke, he was getting so hard that I could see the album start moving up and down. Then he asked me if I had any pictures of when I was a child or my siblings when they were children. Never sobered up so fast and booked it right the F out of there. Because I get replies about drunk driving, this was NYC. I walked 16 blocks through East Harlem and never felt so safe in my life. Oh boy, I have another one. My ex-best friend convinced me to go to a concert with her. I told her I couldn't because I had a long drive the next morning and I didn't want to waste gas or go to bed too late, and she said it was fine. She would drive and would get me home right after the concert. Went to the concert, it was fine. I was ready to go home, but she told me she really wanted to go to an after-party with the band because her crush would be there. I agreed because she really wanted to get with this guy and the chances of it happening seemed high, and I wanted her to be happy. Turns out the after-party was at a decent hotel. Underage kids were straight up walking in with handles of alcohol, and it was really obvious what was going on. The receptionist was eyeing everyone, but nobody gave a frick. My friend and I got to the room. We were the only girls there. Around 40 drunk college guys and 2 girls both under 110 pounds. I'd never experienced being looked at like a juicy steak until that moment. I told her we had to go, but she was hell-bent on staying with her crush. I couldn't convince her, so I called my mum, the most awkward phone conversation of my life, and had her pick me up. Turns out the receptionist called the cops soon after I left, and the party got broken up. I think some people got charged. Last week, I was visiting Los Angeles with my 22-year-old daughter. I had to fill the tank of the rental car. I googled the cheapest gas and waited in line. There was a scummy homeless man yelling, clearly mentally ill. When we got to the pump was broken. You know, when you fill 10 cents of gas and it stops. It took me a full minute to get $1 of gas when the homeless man came up to us. He was yelling, "Now this is a nice car." I grabbed the pump from my daughter and said, "Hit the road!" And we drove off. Funny thing is, my daughter wasn't scared because she was listening to what the man was yelling about. Apparently, the homeless man was being harassed by another driver. The other driver told him not to touch his car. The car was a piece of crap, and the homeless man was making fun of him like, "Oh, don't touch his car. Your car is a piece of crap." That's when he came to our car. "Now this is a nice car. I won't touch this one, but yours is a piece of crap, you butthole." So it ended up being pretty funny. I panicked for nothing. You may have already worked this out, but the narrator had to tone down this individual's language quite a bit so that this video wouldn't get demonetized. I told this once before, but when I was about 8 years old, I was in the car with my parents. They were arguing, which they did a lot, but being trapped in that metal box with them, both of them screaming back and forth, became too much. We stopped at a red light and I unbuckled my seatbelt and got out of the car and started running. My mum, who was in the passenger's seat, ran out after me, and after he pulled over the car, my dad did as well. They caught up to me and their attitudes completely changed. They promised they wouldn't fight again, a promise they broke time and time again until their divorce, but they never did it again in the car. I was at a baseball card convention when news of the incel van attack in Toronto broke. It was a slow afternoon, so a group of us dealers gathered around the lobby TVs to watch, and the other guys started defending him. If he had been an Islamo-terrorist, the frickin' media would have kept that crap under wraps. And, "What do you think's gonna happen when women only go for jerks?" Then the egghead in our group argued that those with less access to women suffer just as much as those with low incomes, and that we should re-educate women to find those men with low sexual market value attractive. I did not want to find out what he meant by re-educate, so I packed up my cards and left. Yes, the women are the problem, not the murderer. Thank God these guys aren't reproducing. Happened a few hours ago. Was in the park with my younger brother just playing football, having a nice time. Suddenly, I see a man looking over in our direction. However, I can't be too sure because I don't have my glasses and I don't want to scare myself for no reason. He's carrying an orange bag, so it's easy to see him. I ignore him and brother and I start walking around randomly. Not following the path, backtracking, just not walking logically, if that makes sense. Kicking the ball to each other. The last time I went to this park on the 1st, a man of the same build and ethnicity followed me, so I felt myself getting paranoid. This man kept his distance, but for instance, we went into the basketball area and he would come to the entrance and lean against the grate, just watching us. He could go behind the trees, it wasn't clear he knew his way around the park, and follow us, which I wouldn't notice if it wasn't for his bag. I wanted to confront him, but I was with my younger brother and didn't want to cause trouble. I wasn't really scared, but more angry and frustrated. The man suddenly starts getting braver and walking faster towards us, so we decide to quickly run home, even though we were only out for 15 minutes. I was at home working on a gate outside. I heard my neighbor shoot off some rounds, so I went to a spot I'd be able to overlook the pond and see if they were getting any of the geese. Then 3 shots came through the bushes right towards my house, roughly 100 feet or so away from me, not towards the pond. So I was like, okay, they're being an idiot. Time to GTFO. I go back to working on the gate about 300 to 400 feet from where I was when I was being stupid and nosy, even though they should not have been firing towards a house. Then a fricking bullet cracked as it went less than 5 feet past my head. Yep, that's when I said, frick this, hid behind a huge-ass tree and called the cops, and waited 45 minutes for them to show up. The guy that I met. College-educated, handsome, retro digs in Long Beach, California. Articulate, funny, packed a picnic for our blind date, complete with cloth napkins. Went back to his place, and the kitchen was a hoarder's dream. At least 6 full sets of dishes, dirty, sitting in neatly stacked piles everywhere. Pots and pans, the same thing. Hundreds of dollars worth of iron cookware stacked on the floor, rusting. Instead of washing dishes, he would buy more. Noped the F out. I told you I was planning on selling them in bulk. One man's trash is another man's treasure. I have leukemia. I completed 5 months of chemo in October, but my white count has been low since then, so I am high risk of infection. My wife just gave birth a few weeks ago, but had severe preeclampsia and had to be put on blood pressure meds. I went to pick up dinner, and on my way home, I figured I'd also grab her meds at the pharmacy real quick. Except a ton of people had the same thought, and I found myself like 20 people back in line. I was set to wait. Wife definitely needed her meds until I hear coughing. I look up and a 2-year-old kid is hacking everywhere. That is no bueno for me. Yep, I had to nope the hell out of that line and send my mother-in-law to the pharmacy for wife's meds. In conclusion, I'm a 35-year-old, tattooed, bearded man afraid of small children. I was at work and thought I needed to fart. Turns out it was diarrhea and made up an excuse to leave for the rest of the day. I have also accidentally crapped my pants at work. I had some weird coughing fit and diarrhea. I didn't make up an excuse. I told my manager I just crapped my pants and I'm going effing home. He just said, "Feel better." When I first moved to where I'm living now, it's across the river from a college town/city with a main street that is littered with restaurants and bars. So one night, a couple of friends and I went out and decided to bar hop. Nothing crazy, just wanted to check out the different places. Walked into one hole-in-the-wall joint with only a handful of people in there. Everybody's head turned and looked at us like we were from another planet. Weird vibe immediately, asking how we're doing and what he can get us. We order our round of drinks. Bartender very slowly says, "Is that all?" Again, weird vibe, but whatever. Random guy, later found out to be the owner, comes and sits next to us and starts chatting us up. Where we're from, what we're doing in the area, if we're cool. Lots of weird conversation starters. At this point, we want out, but our drinks haven't come back yet. So we get our drinks and try to keep to ourselves. Guy keeps asking if he can get us anything at all, off the menu. It's at this point that I realize that the 2 women at the other end are doing coke off the bar. There's also now 2 large men standing against the wall right behind us, just grilling us. Not wanting to make a scene, we all shared talked amongst ourselves for a minute, finished our drinks as fast as possible, paid and left. The owner was trying to talk to us the entire time we were paying and making our way to the door, trying to keep us there as the 2 large men slowly close in. We got the frick out and said nothing until we hit the other side of the street. Grabbing some Waffle House in a not-so-good part of town around 2 a.m. after work. Dude whipped out a gun and was screaming at the chick he was with. Definitely my most gotta get the F out of here moment. A few years later, got a job as a 911 call taker. Same Waffle House got shot up. So there is that. When I realized the shelter I work for is pocketing donated money, keeping and using donations for themselves first, taking their food, taking housing products, all for their own personal use. These people have well-paying jobs with plenty of overtime, benefits like health life and dental. So yeah, screw that place and screw those people. Sucks for the ones that do have to stay there. I'm black. I live near Alabama. A friend was having a party, but she was using a different friend's house as the venue. The house was deep in the woods, and this man at the gas station was being friendly and joking with us. Everything seemed fine until he said something like, "Don't forget the Klan meeting is tonight at 7. I'm kinda blacked out for a second because I'm sure he meant something else, but I got a bad vibe. A company I was working at got bought out by another company. They tried to make us sign agreements that we wouldn't work in the industry for 2 years after working for our company. So I'm not allowed to have a job in my field for 2 years if they lay me off. A bunch of us refused to sign it, but nothing happened. Then people in management started getting moved around, and they put someone in charge of me who was really incompetent. When a big company buys a small company with a lot of name recognition, I can see the writing on the wall. I got another job and got the heck out of there.
Where were you when 9/11 happened? In the forest, camping. No radio, no phone. I came back to civilization 5 days later. Everyone had processed what happened. as much as you would expect. I had not even heard about it, so I was out of sync with the world. Strange times. Man, you must have found a portal out there and accidentally traveled to a bad timeline. There's a really good podcast called 9/12, which is all about how we as a society reacted to 9/11. And one of the stories they tell is about people who were on a boat in the middle of the ocean filming some reality show. It sounds like your experience was very similar to those people. If I'm not mistaken, I think the MTV show The Real World was being filmed during 9/11 as well. I remember them giving them TVs to watch because the show usually didn't allow TVs and stuff in the house. Getting ready to pick up relatives at the airport in preparation for our wedding. How was the airport scene? Oh, their planes were grounded mid-flight. The wedding was canceled. I was pretty young during 9/11, so I wasn't a traveler at that point, but I did have some flights canceled at the start of C-19, and I remember it being a weird feeling. I can only imagine how it felt during 9/11. Under anesthesia at the Boston Children's Hospital, I woke up being moved into an elevator on a gurney. They had finished my surgery, but weren't bringing me to the recovery ward. Boston's Children's Hospital is a very tall building, and Boston had advised all buildings to evacuate all the floors above the 10th floor. So I was moved down to a lobby after my surgery. That's gotta be wild, going under in one reality and waking up in another. That's pretty much like anytime something happens during the night. That last statement is super true. My most recent experience with that was waking up in America and hearing about the earthquakes in Turkey. Not something anyone should have to wake up to. I was sleeping during the first plane, getting ready for work when the second hit. Went to work for 3 hours with no customers. Called the boss, he said close, and went home. Watched CNN and tried to convince my mom that I wasn't about to get drafted. Same, but in high school. Sleeping for the first plane, when waking up to my parents being like, what is going on? Saw the second plane hit. Went to school anyways. We spent all day in every class just watching the news. Sitting on our desks, on the floor, pacing around, just crawling in our own skins. Teachers and students alike. They let us ask questions and express our feelings to the best of everyone's abilities. Lunch period was surreal. There was silence. Not a single plane in the sky. Got in the car, turned on music, and then turned it off immediately. It felt disrespectful. Whatever fast food we got that day was just eaten in silence. So gut-wrenching. Remember it like it was yesterday. Similar, my brother was a truck driver and happened to be in New York State at the time. He called my dad at home. I watched the second plane hit live. I did go to school afterwards, but it was an odd day. I'm in Canada on the border with New York State, so we were glued to CNN. I vaguely remember seeing F-18s flying. I remember sitting in the library watching the news just talking about the events. My brother was stranded in the States for a week or so because the borders were closed. It was long enough over here in Australia. I had an American friend on the internet mention the first plane hit, promoting me to go and turn on the late night news. A few minutes after I started watching, the second plane hit live on TV. Before that, everyone still thought it must have been an accident. But when the second plane hit, we all knew what it meant. This was me at my school. The teachers turned on the news for about a minute before the second plane hit, so my homeroom class saw it happen. After that, the principal got on the PA and said to turn off all the TVs and go about the day as naturally as possible. I was mad when they did that. One of the biggest breaking news events in our lifetime, and they weren't letting us watch it because they were worried that we were scared. I was already scared, and keeping me in the dark made it worse. This must have been a tough situation for adults. I mean, I totally understand wanting to protect children from that madness. It's easily a traumatic experience. On the R train that just passed underneath the towers in Cortlandt Street, the conductor of the R train after mine was instructed to go straight through and not stop. They disobeyed that order and stopped, took on as many people as possible and got out of there. That conductor likely saved a lot of lives. There's almost no mention of that anywhere in the news. Oh my god, that's crazy. Incredibly heroic on their part. I was in Manhattan, watched the towers fall, heard the crowds that had gathered all down Fifth Avenue gasp and scream in unison as the first tower crumbled. Gathered in a packed bar with freaked out coworkers as we first saw the photo of Osama bin Laden on TV. Walked home to Queens with thousands of other shocked New Yorkers in eerie silence, with the occasional ghostly figure of a downtown worker covered in white dust. My ex-wife was in the second tower, got out when the first one was hit. Her brother was in the first tower. Luckily, he also got out. She was knocked down by the concussion of the tower falling. Some stranger picked her up by her elbows. It was her brother. She also had a few other heartwarming tidbits. As she walked home to Brooklyn, she had been breaking in new heels, and some dude in a corner store gave her a pair of flip-flops. They broke 3 blocks later, giving her her first post-9/11 laugh. She still has them today in her hope chest. She also said that people were turning radios to the streets. so she could get a running commentary about potential other attacks, and others were handing out bottles of water to newly minted pedestrian commuters. New Yorkers, man, complete jerks if you're in their way during rush hour. But if you yell help, the whole freaking city comes running. My kind of people. Came home from school, I was in the UK, age 12, with my mom watching it in her office on the 14-inch CRT television/VHS combo. Watched the second one hit. I remember saying, freaking hell, and for once not being told off for it. I have a similar story. I was 8 and also in the UK at the time. I used to go to a friend's house after school and get picked up by my mom after she finished work. I distinctly remember getting in trouble for calling the pilot a silly bastard for flying the plane into a building. I don't think anyone understood the magnitude of the situation at that point. Yeah, that's what I thought when the first plane hit. Some stupid idiot approaching the airport far too low. Then, oh god, this is deliberate, when the second plane hit. Then we got the news of the other planes and I was like, is the US being invaded? I was at home on the other side of the world trying to watch cartoons and being annoyed why I couldn't. I was 8 at the time. Same, 8-year-old Australian here, was totally mad that Pokemon wasn't on that morning. My parents had to sit me down and talk me through the tragedy that had just happened. I remember feeling sad, but also a little mad about missing Pokemon. I was in my mid-20s at the time and on the internet, when a friend in the US told me about the first plane impact. I turned on the late-night CNN feed. Channel 7 used to run it instead of infomercials. I don't remember for sure, but I think it was about 1 a.m. Melbourne time. I woke up my wife and told her I had just saw the start of World War III, and she said, huh? What? I'll just read about it in the morning, and went back to sleep. The next morning, she woke up and said, holy crap, you were serious? That's how I feel when anyone tells me anything while I'm half asleep. I was at the World Trade Center on 9/11 because I worked across the street. I was at the base of the South Tower when I saw the second plane go into the building, and I ran away toward the South Street Seaport. It had a huge impact on my life and still does, but I met the love of my life because of it, and now we have a son. I was thinking about it today because New York Magazine did a profile on us on Valentine's Day of 2002 and called it Love After 9/11. There was a lot of coverage after 9/11 on how many surviving firefighters ended up leaving their wives for the widows of their dead colleagues in the years after. Basically, they would be consoling the widows and form a bond over their shared grief. Strange effects of a terrible day. Trauma bonding is a real thing. If you've never heard of it, look it up. I was in the restaurant business at the time. Woke up to start getting ready to go to wine tasting at Windows of the World at 1 p.m., top floor of the North Tower. Then I turned on the TV. I had taken the evening class about 6 months earlier. If you worked at WOW, I'm sorry for the loss of your coworkers. Heather was a really amazing pastry chef. Wow, this imparts a strange feeling. For you to know and share the name of someone who passed away as the result of the attacks, it immediately humanizes it and makes it more personal instead of a thing that happened. Third day of high school in Long Island. Every TV was turned on around 8:50 a.m. My fourth period global teacher ran out of the class when the first tower fell. My sequential 2 math teacher still gave us a quiz that day. Kid behind me was crying the whole time. His parents worked at the World Trade Center. Never saw him again the following day. That next day, they sent the freshman class on a retreat to meet their fellow classmates, as we previously planned. It was quiet the whole time. In case anyone was curious, I don't remember the kid's name, and I'm pretty sure he lost both parents that day and already knew that they were gone. And he had told the math teacher, who was Mrs. Clean. So yes, she gave us the quiz and him with the possible knowledge of his parents being gone. My high school locked down, and they wouldn't tell us what happened until later in the day. It sucked because it made the whole day strange. Mine also locked down. I was 1 week into the 10th grade studying for my math class. That teacher said, F that, this is history, and wheeled in a TV to the center of the board and turned it on. I stayed in that class for the next 3 periods. I often squatted in his room with some other people, until I got picked up. He still goes down as my favorite teacher. I was in college and my art history professor gave us a test that day. It was at 11 a.m. and all I remember is all of us sitting there just blinking and looking around. I was a sophomore, and someone asked our anthropology professor to turn on the TV. That was already in the classroom, so we could try to understand what was going on. She refused, but none of us really understood what was happening at that point. I had to watch the second plane hit while having breakfast at the main cafeteria a bit later. The TV was very smallish and attached to the wall where it met the ceiling, and it was always on mute. I remember that no one could get cell phone service all day. Aside from the usual contingent of future hipsters, most of the student body had cell phones, but they weren't at all the means of rapid information they are now. Man, I'm old. I don't think I had a cell phone during 9/11, but I think I remember hearing about how phone lines weren't working. Working at a bakery listening to the radio. I was 21. It reminded me of the War of the Worlds broadcast that I learned about in history class. I still wasn't sure it was real until I got home and saw it for myself. Driving to Rutgers University, about 30 miles from New York City, seeing a giant plume of smoke coming up and not realizing what it was from. I got to campus and was told classes were canceled and we were under attack. I had just woke up, turned on the radio, heard the DJ talking about the first plane hitting, then watched the second plane hit live on TV. I was on a plane halfway over the Atlantic from Germany going back to the US. The plane had to turn around and go back to Germany. I was 10 months old. I still have the passport with my 9/11/01 stamp on it. Wow, there's an amazing documentary about the emergency landings that had to take place at the airport in Canada because of the hijackings. It's an interesting story, but I'm glad your family was able to go back instead of having to deal with that. I was working in downtown Ottawa, Canada, for those that don't know, in a skyscraper when it came on the news after the first plane hit. I remember the first news saying that they thought it was a news helicopter that had accidentally hit one of the towers. I went to one of our boardrooms and saw the second tower hit live on TV on one of our massive projector screens. We were told to go home at some point after the news of other planes started coming down. Leaving our building and traveling through downtown was intense. We knew planes were being diverted, we didn't know if we were under attack too. I was 1 block away from Parliament Hill, and the streets were filled with military and heavily armed police vehicles. I also saw people jumping and the towers fall while it was being recorded live. Even though I wasn't in New York City, it was still an event experienced in real time. Some years, on September 11th, it hits harder for some reason. I was in the 5th grade, 5th floor math class, looking out the window like usual at the Manhattan skyline from our school in Queens. We didn't see the first plane hit, but we did see the smoke and we pointed it out to our teacher and said that must be some kind of fire. I remember thinking, how the heck were the firemen going to spray water all the way to the top? Teacher next door came in and told our math teacher to turn on the radio. When the second plane hit, the radio went off, and soon after we were all called to the lunchroom. Some of the kids' names were called, and they were pulled to go to the principal's office afterwards. I found out that their parents had worked in the towers. It was very surreal not knowing what was going on and the teachers all huddling together whispering amongst themselves. After a few hours, they let us go home, and I ran home across the street and made it to the 5th floor apartment asking my mom what was going on, and if I could go to the roof and look at the skyline. I went up there by myself and it was the weirdest view I'd ever seen. The towers weren't there anymore. I stayed there for what felt like the rest of the day just looking at the smoke and fighter jets flying above me towards Manhattan. School days for the next few months were weird. We were like in this limbo where all we had to do was have positive talks about America and make "United we stand, divided we fall" posters to hang around town. But there was always an underlying feeling of hurt and sadness. Those were some strange days. At the exact moment, sleeping. I was in California, so I was still asleep at the time. I was in college and I overslept that day, woke up and was in a rush to get to my first class. My roommate at the time was trying to show me something on TV that morning, but I was in so much of a rush I didn't pay attention to him and left for class. In the car, I had a CD playing. If I had the radio on, I probably would have heard it there. When I got to school, the parking lot was usually full, and running late meant you wouldn't be able to find a parking spot. But it was almost empty, and I was able to get a parking spot right up in front of the school. I should have known something was off, but I was just happy to be getting a good parking spot. I rushed to class, and when I got there, this class that usually had 50 students normally had about a half dozen people there. I said, "What's going on? Where is everybody?" That's when I finally found out what happened. The internet was a thing and some people did have cell phones, but there wasn't constant communication like there is now, so I was able to go the whole morning without knowing. I was also in college and late for class that day, but still living at home. Flicked on the light bulb and it burned out. Went downstairs to get a new one and said, "Hey mom, the light burned out." And she said, "This is honestly the worst thing I've ever seen or heard." I was like, "Don't worry, I'm changing it now." 10 minutes later, idiot me figured out what she meant. She had saw the second plane hit. I remember for years waiting for things to settle down and get back to normal, and it just never did. So this is a genuine question. I was born in 2002 and always hear about people saying things never got back to normal after 9/11. But what changed? I realize airport security is very different now, but beyond that, I've never been able to grasp what people were talking about. Was it similar to the pandemic where it was just a fundamental culture shift that can't really be articulated, or was it something more tangible than that? Well, this is my opinion as a Gen Xer, 1967. There was this aura of invincibility. The US takes the fight to you, and no one ever came to our house and picked a fight with America. The closest thing was Pearl Harbor, and you saw how things turned out for Japan. So don't even think about it. In that one act, America was no longer invincible. Also, it wasn't a country who did it, but a group of secret extremists. We were attacked by a ghost. The US was vulnerable to a ragtag group of misfits. What if a country with resources wanted to do us harm? We're screwed. This sense of and projection of invincibility has never returned. I was taught in school the US is a melting pot of individuals. We're all different individuals. But you come to America, assimilate, and melt into the big happy family called America. Middle Easterns who immigrated to America were perceived as rejections of their country's cultures and ideologies in favor of becoming more westernized. That mindset of welcoming and acceptance of foreigners flipped immediately. The hijackers, who were foreigners, lived amongst us for months and years. Immediately, there was a huge distrust of Middle Easterners. This has not changed for a lot of Americans and has given a rise to this plague of nationalism you see now. Also, the heightened airport security and the US government's surveillance of its citizens in the name of national security flies in the face of this notion America is the freest country on earth. Additionally, there was this huge amount of propaganda that said, as a patriotic American, if you see something suspicious, say something to authorities. This sense of true freedom has never returned, and we're all on the outlook to report something suspicious. I believe this has morphed into Karens reporting suspicious people, aka minorities, in their neighborhoods. There's probably more. These are the biggest changes I've seen from 9/11, and there's no denying that there was a ripple effect after. Celebrating my 17th birthday. This was in Colorado, so the news broke right after I left for school. I got flowers and cards from friends, and we hung out before class started. Then I went to first period. We had a sub and she opened the class with the news. She let us watch it on TV, and by that point, both towers had already been hit. I was kind of just half doing my assignments and checking the TV. I distinctly remember looking up after the first tower collapsed and said, dumbfounded, "Where's the other one?" Every class had the news on, and we obviously didn't do anything else that day. Then I went home and we didn't really know what to do. Nobody felt like celebrating, but my grandparents were there, so I decided to at least open gifts. At the time, shirts with cityscapes were trendy. They were black with the skyline and silver glitter. I pointed out one or two mentions that they could be a cool birthday gift. I opened one box, and staring back at me is one of the shirts I liked. It was the World Trade Center. We all stared in horrified silence, and I just put it down and sat there for a moment. Canadian here. I was just dropping my girlfriend off to class, and I heard about it on the CBC. I got home to see the replay of the second plane hit. I was driving on the South Street by the Dahl residence in Halifax when I heard it. I will never forget that day or that moment. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a joke too. I was in the 4th grade at the time. As I remember it, it was just a normal day. Nothing odd going on at school in the morning. A classmate, her mother babysat me from time to time, went home for lunch. When she came back to school, she said something about how planes had hit a tower in the US. I don't remember anything out of the ordinary that afternoon at school, but all I could think about is how outrageous of a story that was. I didn't like her much. She lied all the time too. I remember after my dad came in to pick me up to take me home, I put it on TV, getting ready to watch The Simpsons and wait for dinner. But The Simpsons weren't on. All it was on almost every channel was the news about what had happened. And at that moment I was like, oh my god, she wasn't lying. Was still mad The Simpsons weren't on, but I ended up not sleeping that night. I was asleep at my parents' house. My mom came in and woke me up. She was upset. She wouldn't tell me what it was at first. She made me get up and see it on TV. I still had to go to work that day at Walmart, but there wasn't anybody shopping. I was 18, fresh out of high school. I remember thinking, among other things, that we were about to go to war, and I would probably get drafted. So I figured why not end this video with my own personal story where I was during 9/11. I was in the 8th grade, and I had just gotten to my dyslexia class. This class only had like 6 students in it, and we were pretty cool with the teacher. Well, we thought it was going to be a normal goof around day when one of my classmates, a big guy, we will call him Jimmy, comes walking into the class and says, "Did you guys see? A plane crashed into a building." We all responded like, "What are you talking about, Jimmy?" He then said, "Yeah, look, turn on the TV, it's on the news." So my teacher lets us turn on the TV we had in the classroom, and we just sat there and watched the news coverage of the planes crashing into the towers. Now, I won't sit here and say I understood the gravity of the situation at the time. I was in middle school. All I cared about was video games, girls, and TV. I finished the rest of the day, but so many kids were taken out of class by their families. I remember going home and every channel just covering the attacks. I think only kids channels like Nickelodeon continued playing their regular programming. I was really into MTV at the time, and even they were covering the attacks. I might be mistaken. I remember trying to change the channel and my brother getting super pissed at me the next morning, said I was being disrespectful or something along those lines. I remember my mom getting after him and saying something like, "Don't get mad at him, just let him be a kid." Kind of her way of shielding me from the madness of what was going on. After that, I just remember the world felt different. America was no longer this place that felt safe or awesome. This might have been the first time I noticed hate in the world, because as many know, people from the Middle East during this time got treated differently. It was horrible. But on the other side of the coin, it was also the one time that America felt united. Everyone was on board with getting justice for what happened. Kind of surreal when you compare 9/11 to how Americans treat each other today. 9/11 changed how America saw the world, in my opinion. I also think it reminded a lot of people that life is fragile, and you should appreciate every moment you got, because you never know when it's going to be your last.
What's your "I finally met my online friend" horror story? Back during World of Warcraft's second expansion, there was this guy in my guild I'd become friends with, mostly through other friends. We'd talked more and more over time and become fairly close. He had this butthole roommate, and I could hear the guy sometimes, especially when something went wrong during a raid. He'd scream and throw fits. He was pretty awful sounding. My friend told me he wasn't just loud and obnoxious, but verbally and sometimes physically abusive too. I had my own apartment, so I said, "You know what? Come stay with me, just long enough to get you on your feet and into a place that's safe." He showed up at my place with a trash bag full of his stuff and laptop. I set him up in the apartment and started trying to help him find a job. Well, he did not want a job. He did not get a job either. He sat in my apartment day after day, eating my food and slowly draining my savings. No matter how hard I tried to get him motivated, he would just dig in his heels and somehow become more sedentary. Eventually, I told him he had to go. I couldn't afford to keep him there. He was just couch surfing. I spoke to some people and eventually pieced together that his method of securing a new, temporary place was playing on the sympathies of his friends to convince them he was in a terrible living situation. It just worked really well on me because he had that loud, obnoxious roommate to play off. He wound up calling a nearby relative to come and get him, I think his aunt. I don't know what he told her I supposedly did, but I have never seen a more venomous look from someone in my life. As far as I know, he moved in with his sister and brother-in-law after that, but frankly, I don't care where he ended up. He also stole a bunch of my stuff. First and last time I do anything like that. Met this dude on EverQuest and we played some games together ever since. Been a part of the same guild, help each other out on mobile games, and have conversations about life in general. It isn't him that's the horror story. It was his mum. So one day, I think we were playing World of Warcraft at the time, I log on to do some quests. Suddenly, his user comes on and asks to chat by video. We've done this before and there's no problem, but after I click to start the video chat, there's his mum butt naked on the screen. She asks me to watch her pleasure herself and I'm like, "No lady, this is awkward as F." And I log off for a few days. I get an email from my friend. He wants to know why I haven't shown up for quests or anything. So I tell him what happened and he's seriously like, WTF. Turns out his mum had been doing this to a lot of his online buddies and eventually goes to prison for committing the unspeakable act with a minor or two. Buddy's still doing great though, wife and kids, plus we still play the occasional game together. I never actually met the guy but spoke to him on the phone. We'd met on MySpace when I was in college and exchanged email addresses when we realized we lived in the same town. Eventually, I gave him my phone number and made plans for him to call me. When he did, his voice creeped me out. It was how I imagined a serial killer would sound. By the time I got past it and was comfortable talking to him on the phone, I started noticing other red flags. Whenever I brought the neighborhood up, he changed the subject. At one point, I asked him what his favorite restaurant on the boulevard was, and he hedged. So I made up a restaurant that I said was my favorite. He immediately said that was his favorite too, and he especially loved one of their dishes. He went on and on about this wonderful place that didn't exist, and there wasn't a similar one in town, so he couldn't be confused. I called him out on the fact that he obviously had never been to my neighborhood. Turned out he didn't even live in the same state as me. It's like I don't understand what this person was actually trying to gain. Was he just that starved of human conversation? Guy I knew in college met a girl online and spent every day talking about her. She lived about 6 hours away, so he planned to take a semester off and pursue this relationship. He got a job in her town and asked if I'd help him move out there, since my car would hold more than he could take on the bus. I had a long weekend off and figured, why not? A road trip could be fun. I'd drive him out as a goodbye present, and the way back I planned to visit Yellowstone. Well, we arrive and it turns out he doesn't have an apartment lined up, and he found a job posting in his girlfriend's town. He hadn't actually gotten the job, or even applied yet. I make a bunch of phone calls and find him a room to rent that will let him move in that day with just first, last, and deposit, even without a job. I'm tired and disgusted with his lack of planning, but figure it's worth staying the night and trying to end things on good terms with my buddy. Then he breaks down and confesses he hasn't actually met this girl. The nights he spent video chatting with her were really just him watching her vlog and jacking it. They've never talked, never texted, never even emailed. Hell, he's never even left so much as a comment or like on one of her videos. She genuinely didn't, still doesn't, know he existed. His plan was to hang out at this game shop she talks about until she showed up, and somehow create a relationship from that. He thought that they'd meet and she'd fall in love with him and move back to our college town to marry him, all before the next semester began. That didn't happen. Instead, I made my buddy buy a bus ticket for his ride back to school and left. He came back to school and got more cringy, not less. I lost track of him after that. I met a guy online and we really got on, and he came over a few times so we could hang out. I did find him attractive and tried to hint that I was into him. Note, I can't flirt to save my life. But nothing ever happened. After a few dates, he suddenly vanished offline. No social media, he wasn't answering texts or emails, nothing. I thought he'd ghosted me. After 6 months, he reappears. I asked him where he'd been and he said, "I don't want to talk about it." A few weeks after, there was a fad where people were Googling their names and posting humorous stories they'd found about similar people with their name. Mine was about a ship that had my initials, and I started to Google friends' names just out of boredom and morbid curiosity. Googled his name and found a local news story from his area, one of those crime and courts things that he had been done for statutory assault of a minor, online grooming, and had his computer and phone seized as evidence. When I was younger, I met an online friend in a public space for the first time. He was about my age and hadn't lied about that, so I guess I let my guard down. Anyway, after we walked for a while, I noticed he had led me down a dark alley with no other people. He then looked at me and said how he wanted to really commit the unspeakable act on me right then and there. Right after he had said that, my instinct kicked in and I ran as fast as I've ever run in my life, until I came to the train station. Here I jumped on the first train I saw and got the hell away from him. I'm not sure that's so much an instinct as correctly understanding language verbatim. Also, apologies. The particular subject of this video is just going to naturally entail a certain amount of online predators. This was way back in the mid-90s. Bulletin board systems were all the rage. I made friends with this guy from NC. He was friends with a bunch of us from my dorm, mostly females, which probably should have been a red flag, but I was extremely naive at the time. A couple months in, he mentioned that he was coming to our state for a wedding and asked if he could come by our college to meet everyone. It was agreed he'd sleep in my dorm room since my roommate was almost never around. Now, there was no discussion or thought of sex, but I was pretty excited to meet this guy and see if he was as funny and charming as he was online. Well, day arrives, dude shows up. I should mention that I and all my college friends were 18 or 19. This guy was 24. Or so he said. Guy looks like, and I'm not exaggerating, a cancer patient. Pale, gaunt features, long greasy pale blonde hair, except where he was bald on top, and just generally looked like he was about to die or he was dressed as a ghoul for Halloween. He insisted on hugging all of us. I was trying to remind myself that looks don't matter and that he was a cool guy despite his very unsettling appearance. But then, when we all started hanging out, things just got worse. He was asking really invasive questions of all of us, making weird comments to whatever was said, and just all around creepy and distressing. I was sitting on the floor with another friend and actively rocking back and forth from discomfort. I lied and said I had hurt my back and that sleeping on the floor helped, because that night he kept insisting we could share my tiny, twin college bed. Nope. Last time I ever met anyone from that site. I don't know if it's a horror story, but it's how I ended up where I live now. I played WoW for a few years with a pretty regular group, got to know them offline, and at one point, two of them, a couple, invited me to move across the country. At the time, I didn't have anything tying me to where I was, so I packed up and moved. Got out here, moved in with my friends, and everything seemed okay. My buddy was a long-haul driver, so he was always gone for days at a time. His girl would try to set me up multiple times with two of her friends at the same time. one in Minnesota. I ended up having a hard time finding work for a while, finally got a job though, and was putting some money away while helping watch their kids. Out of nowhere one day, my buddy accuses me of trying to fool around with his girl. Nothing had ever happened, but I had noticed her spending more and more time in my room when he wasn't there. I knew his history, and his previous relationship had ended after she cheated with a friend of his. He wouldn't listen, so I got kicked out without any warning, and they stole about $1,000 worth of my stuff and later moved. Ultimately, it all worked out for me. Cut the friend and his girl out of my life completely and moved on. Now I have a good job here, wife and kids. Said he was 14. Turns out he was 38. My parents gave him a stern talking to. Everyone in the replies is saying how he was a child molester and all that, but let me clear things up. He was always nice and friendly until I found his Facebook and saw his age, at which my parents had a mental breakdown. Was never allowed to play video games with him online again. Returning to this post later, okay, maybe he was. After college, I was playing a game called EVE Online. I was in a corporation with a dude who I thought was the coolest. He had sold stuff in-game for real-world money and had built a supercomputer. He had a smoking hot girlfriend and had pictures of them rock climbing doing some super cool things. He was also like a head chef where he worked, and since I was a chef as well, I had a little bit of a bromo crush on him. He told me after I graduated that he could hook me up with a manager job and all I had to do was move up there. I sold everything I owned that day at a pawn shop and bought a U-Haul and started driving. 1 hour before I got there, it was like a week-long drive, he called me and told me the job was no longer available and I shouldn't come. When he found out how close I was, he said to just come anyways. When I got there, I was completely blown away. They lived in a disgusting Section 8 apartment with 4 other people, in a 1-bedroom apartment. They had like 3 cats, which I'm allergic to, and a kid as well. Day 1, it was all illegal substances and partying. I did not partake. I was not enthused. Day 2, I went into the city looking for a crap job to survive. I got one. It was terrible. Day 3, my buddy tells me we're all moving out and into a nice apartment. Week 3, we actually move into a new apartment, and the first night in that apartment, he starts beating his smoking hot girl in front of their child. The second time he beat her, I called the cops. Him and his girlfriend immediately said I was the bad guy and that they were just loving each other. They had the cops escort me from the apartment. So there I was, 1,700 miles away from home, homeless at 2 a.m., and it's frickin' raining on all my things. Lars, you are a sack of crap and I hope you die of space herpes. Look, most chefs aren't crazy, spouse-abusing, illegal substance addicts. But as a guy who worked 8 years in hospitality, I will say that I met more chefs that fit that category than in any other field I've worked in. I've been active in numerous online communities over the years, and have been fortunate enough to hang out with many of the friends I've made there in person. There's only been one incident I couldn't cope with. He picked me up at the airport, which was very nice of him, and as soon as we got into the car, he started picking his nose. There's a lot that goes through your mind when you hop into a vehicle with someone you've never been alone with, and you immediately catch them 2 knuckles deep in their rostrum. I looked quickly away so that he wouldn't know I caught him and be embarrassed if he was trying to sneak one out before I noticed. If he did notice, he didn't seem embarrassed, so I relaxed a little. I guessed maybe he was so confident about himself and our friendship that he descended past caring if I saw him take care of a quick boog. Fine, sure. When I finally looked back at him, he was wiping his fingers across his dashboard. To this day, I'm not really sure what to think, but this guy spent the entirety of the few hours we were together scooping out boogers and wiping them off on parts of his car, or the table, or wherever it was that we'd stopped at. I realized I was being transported in a rolling booger shrine, and that there was nothing I could touch without needing to wash my hands. I was sitting on a crust of fossilized booger stuff. I had to be. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. He was a nice dude, but I wound up ollieing out of our visit early because I couldn't handle it. I don't consider myself a clean freak, but as wiping started to stack, it was all I could do to not throw open the passenger door and roll myself out into traffic to escape. I still wonder if I should have done or said anything to save him some grief in the future, but it didn't feel like it was my place, you know? What do you even say? He was driving cross-country with a friend. I said I had a couch or floor they could crash on if needed. He was great. She was an annoying cow. She hated everything, was annoyed by my cat, didn't like anything I had to eat or drink, etc. They were literally there for like 16 hours. I met a really cool group of people from a chat group website called XAT that lives in minimal distance away from me, like maybe 15 minutes, and the horror story part is that I was in my emo phase and probably made a lasting impact on their lives as a hot topic connoisseur. After 4+ years of playing World of Warcraft together and chatting, online and on the phone, he invited me to visit him in Australia. I figured it was safe since I'd known him for quite a while and had never gotten any weird vibes. No flirtation, no creeperiness, nothing. 2 days into my very clearly stated platonic visit, he tried to commit the unspeakable act with me. I ditched all my stuff except for what I had in a small duffel bag and took off, traveling on my own for the 2 weeks until my flight home. A few months later, I received an unsigned postcard from the Gold Coast that just said, "Thinking of you," with a smiley face. Ugh. Obviously the first offense is worse, but that postcard is just... ugh. Not a horror story, but about a year after I made the move from Massachusetts to South Carolina, I was playing video games and a guy on my team talked about how he just moved into a house in the same area that I moved from. So I PM'd him and turns out he had moved into my old place and was playing in my old room with his desk in the same spot I had mine. Wow, this one isn't creepy, but probably the strangest one I've read so far. A couple of years ago, this girl messaged me on Reddit saying she had really connected with a comment I made about first seeing the ocean, because she had just gone through a similar experience. She was going to come down to Chicago to visit a friend of hers, and asked for suggestions of things to do. I gave her a bunch, and then we kept talking and finding out that we had more and more in common. We eventually started talking over the phone and text messages, and when she came down, we went out for burgers and beer. We kept talking every day after that, and I was really starting to like her. She said she wanted to come down to Chicago again if she could stay with me. I told her, of course, and a few weeks later she was here for Saturday and Sunday. Really, it was mostly just Sunday because she got in late on Saturday and fell asleep on my couch. The next day we went to the zoo and had a really amazing day. After that, we came back to my place and decided to go to the brewery nearby, which made a beer that had her name in it. We went there and then ended up bar hopping through until we ended up near the dive bar by my apartment. We drank and played pool there and eventually grabbed some to-go beers and headed back. I asked if she wanted to see the place by the river I liked to go and drink and think. We sat and eventually started making out and decided to head back to my apartment. We hooked up and then the next day went to the south side to get breakfast at a place she really liked near her friend's apartment before she had to drive back. We kept talking after that and I was planning on coming up to visit her in Detroit. But then one day she just ghosted me out of nowhere. Not as horrible as some other stories, but it was really crappy for me because I actually really liked this girl, and to this day I have no idea why she stopped talking to me. By the way, she's definitely not dead. We followed each other on Instagram and I saw that she was okay a bit after she ghosted me. I had a layover in Amsterdam and I met up with a buddy I'd been chatting with on Soulseek for years. Electronic music file sharing. He gave me directions to his work, we delivered a huge wheel of cheese to a church in the red light district, then got drunk and high in a bar. 10 out of 10, most Dutch experience possible in Amsterdam. Only horror show part was how tall Dutch people are and how they speak English. This guy was like 6'7" and his voice was high to match, and all loopy and sing-songy. Very hard to take seriously as a person. Dutch people have the worst accent, really. And I can know 'cause I'm Dutch. The narrator would like to sincerely apologize for his Dutch accent. I'd been chatting to a girl for quite some time and finally ended up visiting her house, about 50 miles away, for an evening of enjoying each other's company. We wake up the next morning to loud noises, which turned out to be her fiancé I knew nothing about, ripping a window off its hinges and climbing in as she'd locked him out. Locked the door and left the key in the lock. There was a strange car on the driveway, so he thought she might be in trouble. Alas, it was me in trouble as this guy was huge and a bit upset at this point. I managed to talk him down and explained the situation, to then find she had called the police and accused him of breaking and entering. During the time the police were questioning him, I made my escape and hightailed it out of there. I had a guy profess his love for me, over Skype. He wanted to come see me. He lived in the UK, I live in the States. Okay, I'll include some backstory. I knew him for about 3 years prior. He was a fairly popular streamer at the time, and I was one of his viewers. Eventually became a mod for him. We started talking on Discord and then Skype. I was 20 at the time of this event. Except, I had a boyfriend at the time. I told him this. I told him that he was wasting his time and I have zero interest in him. He is still coming. I told him there was no time to see him as I had work and school. He says it's fine. He will wait until I have time to see him. I told him not to come. He says he has his parents' blessings. So he came. He stayed in a hotel for 3 weeks while I had to deal with finals, work, and spending time with my boyfriend. I hung out with him twice, once with a group of friends and once with my boyfriend. He got mad because he said he wanted to hang out with me, alone, in his hotel room, and when I said no, he flipped. He said that because he flew over here, I should at least hang out with him. He flew back home to the UK a few days later and blocked me on all social media. In conclusion, dude travels from the UK to profess his love for me, is upset that I didn't change my mind. Why did I even meet him? I knew him for a long time. I thought we were friends. I thought that he would come and realize that I didn't have feelings for him if I said it to his face. I thought I could save the friendship. I never thought he would hurt me, but even then I was never alone with him, not even close. What's a rule that was implemented somewhere that massively backfired? My city has issues with loud bikes and vehicles, so as a deterrent, the city put up decibel meters that displayed how loud your engine is, similar to those signs that read your speed and display it to you. But instead of deterring anyone, people would pull up to those signs and rev the heck out of their engines to see who could get the highest decibel count. The city took the counters down within a week. I work in manufacturing, and we get paid piece rate, so the more I run, the more I get paid. We also have a base hourly pay rate of $10 per hour, so whichever pays more, the hourly rate or the piece rate, is what we get paid for the day. On bad days, sometimes they bump us up to $12 an hour for the day, and when we train new people, we get paid $15 an hour to compensate for having to slow down or stop our machines to teach the new people. The big boss, my boss's boss's boss, came in last week. Now, he used to work the line like I do now, but you can tell he's living comfortably in his corporate life and has forgotten some of the bad parts of this job. He told my boss that we are no longer to receive training pay because, by his logic, if we're working with someone, we should be making more than $15 an hour anyway. And these past 3 weeks or so, we have been doing a lot of training. So a few of us got together at the end of the day and agreed, if they aren't paying us, we won't train people. We will teach the new people enough to make us some money and leave the training to the designated trainers. 2 people split between 15 or so new hires, but they make $17.50 an hour. The policy lasted 4 days. Buddy of mine told me about a happy hour promotion a bar ran close to his campus. Apparently the special was something stupid like 50-cent beers that lasted until the first person went to the bathroom. As he tells it, the first few weeks went without incident, but once it became more popular, people were going to extreme lengths to not be that guy, including wearing adult diapers. Once people tried to covertly pee in corners and trash cans, the bar cancelled the promotion. At my old job, someone abused lunch, so they made a few of them text in when they started and finished lunch. One guy specifically would text the start time, place he got food, his order in detail, the address, price, etc., even when he bought a snack while out. That stopped a week later. Good old malicious compliance, the greatest form of rebellion against an overregulated, lifeless workplace. Worked for a marketing firm that often locked you out of the building if you weren't back in your cubicle by the second your break was up. They revoked your break the next day as punishment. This is not legal here in New York State. They got into a lot of trouble. The organizers of the 1994 Caribbean Tournament Cup had a rather odd change to the rules for extra time. If a game was still drawn at full time, it would go to extra time, but the first goal scored would win. This is perfectly normal, the golden goal rule. What was different is that they ruled that winning this way would count as having won by 2 goals for the purpose of the tournament qualification, instead of just 1. Barbados went into a match against Grenada needing 2 goals to qualify for the main tournament. If they lost or won by only 1 goal, Grenada would qualify instead. Under the regular rule, this would mean that if the match went to extra time, there would basically be no point in Barbados playing because even if they scored, they would only win by 1 goal and not qualify. But the 2-point rule would motivate them to play on. Sound good? Well, you might be able to guess what happened. The match looked like it was about to end with Barbados 2, Grenada 1. A win for Barbados, but not the 2 goals they needed. So Barbados deliberately scored an own goal in the last few minutes of the match, making the score 2-2, hoping to trigger extra time and a chance to score the magic 2-value goal. The Grenada players quickly realized they could do the same, score an own goal to make the match 3-2 to Barbados, which would have Barbados winning by only 1 goal so Grenada would qualify. But the Barbados players realized that too, and so they began to defend Grenada's goal. So for the last 7 minutes of the match, Grenada were trying to score a goal in either net, since scoring a goal against Barbados would give them 3-2 and they would win the match, and scoring in their own goal would make it 3-2 to Barbados, so they would lose the match but win the qualification, and Barbados were defending both. Amazingly, Barbados did actually manage to do so, successfully defending themselves while half of their team were defending Grenada's goal against Grenada, and then scored the golden goal in extra time and qualified. When Domino's said all pizzas would be delivered in 30 minutes or less or your pizza was free, all the delivery drivers kept getting in car accidents to get your pizza to you on time, so it wouldn't come out of their paycheck. It was a short-lived venture. My company has a strict no-alcohol policy. You can't begin work within 10 hours of having had a drink. So when there's a staff shortage and they need me to come in right away, guess who just cracked open a cold one? My work has an infraction system. If you're a minute late, that's half a point. If you're up to 4 hours late, that's half a point. So if you're going to be a minute late, you might as well be 4 hours late because it's the same penalty. For those of you who keep pointing out that you would miss 4 hours of pay, I know. My work is weird and lets you fill in missing time with a PTO at the end of the work week. We also don't get sick days. So you have to take PTO if you are sick, and even then you're likely to get points because you called in less than 24 hours before your shift starts. It's not an issue if you get half a point and don't get another for 6 months, because the first one will have fallen off by then. English law in Wales set the death penalty for stealing a sheep. Welshmen caught stealing sheep would claim to be making love to them. They would get a lesser penalty for bestiality. The consequence of this is that the Welshmen gained a reputation as sheep shaggers. A famous example from Freakonomics was when a daycare started charging a small fine for parents who picked up their children late. Instead of resulting in more on-time arrivals, the new policy actually caused more late pickups. This is because the parents were originally worried that a late pickup would be a significant burden on the daycare employees. But because the fine was so small, only a few dollars, they decided that it must not be a big inconvenience for the daycare. Alcohol bans at college football games has led to increased intoxication problems because fans are loading up before going in the stadium. Yep, funny how people turning up to a game loaded instead of gradually getting tipsy over 2 hours might have increased the occurrence of boozed-up altercations. Worked for a warehouse 4 days a week, 11 a.m. through 9:30 p.m. Monday to Thursday. They reiterated many times during the interview process that overtime was optional. My first day, my supervisor told me that overtime is indeed optional, but if you don't stay for overtime, then everybody else has to stay even later. So if you do leave on time, don't come back. Whatever. I didn't mind the extra hours too much, although a 10.5-hour shift is already long. But the bonus was that we could all go early if all the orders were done. As you can imagine, the good workers busted their butts from start to finish cutting as many corners, good and bad ones, as they could in order to get out early. Normally, this ended up with us being able to leave around 15 minutes early, or on a really good day where the stars aligned, i.e. everyone showing up, we could leave as early as 7:30 or 8. However, leaving that early only happened once or twice a year at most. Overtime was every week. Every single Monday we would work until 2 a.m. 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. isn't ideal when you have no idea when you're off. At around 7 p.m. we'd start to get an idea if we're in for another hour or another 6. One of the genius new hires mentioned to the boss in the office how he was hoping to get out by 6. Oh, good. Apparently, the boss was thinking us leaving early was a common occurrence now and decided that no one was going to be leaving early anymore. Sweep or dust or whatever, but no one leaves until 9:30. All of a sudden, we were late every single day without fail. Why? We were working our butts off to get out early but failing every day and ending up on time or still late. By taking away our ability to leave early, everyone gave up working hard. Slow down, we got another hour left anyways. I'm not sweeping. Went from about 45 hours a week to 55. 13 hours every day. Nobody ever left early anymore. But nobody left on time either. Losses for everybody involved because the boss didn't realize that us leaving early for 2 days out of a year actually gave us the daily motivation to work our butts off on the other 360. In conclusion, boss put a stop to leaving early. No incentive to work our butts off anymore means paying overtime every day. I worked at Macy's one Christmas and found out the reason why you can never find anyone at the registers. It's because they don't allow employees to stand at the register, because it's intimidating. I can't tell you how many times I gave up trying to purchase something there because I couldn't find anyone to ring me up. One of the high-rise blocks I have to maintain has a sign saying, "Anything left here will be removed due to it being a fire risk." People just dump the crap there they don't want, like fridges and sofas, and by law, we have to take it. F me, right? To clarify, I have no authority to put up cameras as they are council blocks, and I'm a council worker that has zero help from management, because quite frankly, they don't give a crap because they don't have to remove it. Congrats, British taxpayers, you pay me to remove jerks fly-tipping daily. I'm sorry for the crappy human beings on this earth. The British government was concerned about the number of venomous cobra snakes in Delhi. The government therefore offered bounty for every dead cobra. Initially, this was a successful strategy, as large numbers of snakes were killed for the reward. Eventually, however, enterprising people began to breed cobras for the income. When the government became aware of this, the reward program was scrapped, causing the cobra breeders to set the now worthless snakes free. As a result, the wild cobra population further increased. The apparent solution for the problem made the situation even worse. Ah yes, bounty systems. Abused at the cost of almost everyone apart from the hunters themselves, nearly every time they've been introduced in history. Case in point. In French Indochina, there was a major problem with rodents eating supplies and bringing disease. Given the plentiful supply of cheap unemployed workers, the colonial authorities thought they could be used to kill the rats and bring their numbers down. The French had a somewhat racially prejudiced view of the work ethic of the locals, so decided to pay them per rat killed, rather than per hour worked. Each was compensated for every dead rat they handed over. A year or so later, the colonial authorities discovered the peasants had set up rat breeding farms in the jungle. Dry counties were meant to reduce the use of alcohol in certain areas, but they resulted in people who wanted to get drunk driving further away from home to do so, increasing the odds and frequency of drunk driving accidents. Also, many attempts to rescind dry county laws ended up getting countered by campaigns paid for by the bars and liquor stores that set up on the edge of dry counties, typically under the guise of religious messages. Yesterday in Kenya, our governor in Nairobi banned public transport from getting to town, so people had to walk long distances to work. And since we don't have enough pavements, people ended up walking on the roads, like 3,000, and there was a traffic jam that lasted for more than 5 hours. The next day, the ban was removed. Question 1. What was the goal of banning public transport? They thought public transport was the reason behind all the traffic jams and noise pollution, which is wrong. Easiest way to fix things is to inconvenience people with money and power. Washington state made it mandatory for schools to drop their room temperatures to save on electricity. The result? Teachers brought their own heaters into the offices and use of electricity increased. Not a law. My school does this and have made it clear it costs $1,000 a day to heat our buildings. They dropped the temp and it can be 50 degrees Fahrenheit in the morning in my classroom. Everyone has space heaters, which are illegal by the fire code. Admin and maintenance freak out over it, but refuse to turn up the heat as they sit in their separately heated offices at a comfortable temperature. Not sure if it's still the case, as I graduated many years ago, but where I went to college, the hospitals had a thing where if someone came in with alcohol poisoning and they were underage, then they'd also call the cops. So of course, what happened was when underage kids really should have gone to the hospital, their friends wouldn't call an ambulance because of fear the cops would punish people. Luckily, while I was there weren't many deaths due to alcohol poisoning, but there were more than 0. I worked somewhere with a clean desk policy on Friday afternoons. The common way around this was that everyone would just sweep all their paperwork into an envelope, stick it in the internal mail, and then it would arrive back on your desk on Monday morning. At one point in history, the president of Paraguay tried to eliminate racism by making it illegal to marry someone within your own ethnic group. Needless to say, this was quite racist. You have to eat whatever you touch was a rule in my kindergarten which led to all the children touching all the food to call dibs on it. Head teacher at the school I worked at made it a rule that the primary-aged kids, 5 through 11, weren't allowed to run when they were out in the playground. That was fun to try and enforce. Let's not allow young children to run on the playground during their recess at school. What could go wrong? Why are the kids getting so fat? Middle school wanted to create a trash-free environment, so they removed the trash cans from the parking lots, halls, and cafeteria. Then just told the kids to toss your trash when you get home or in a classroom. The amount of litter skyrocketed overnight. After a week or so, they brought back the cans. Last summer in Sweden, bus drivers in some counties started wearing shorts due to the heatwave. After being denied to continue doing so by management, they started wearing skirts instead. Dress code policies had banned shorts, but not skirts. Okay, I lived in Sweden during that time and I never saw this. I desperately hope it's true. Gotta love that country. Air pollution became a big problem in the late 80s and early 90s Athens, mostly due to the number of old, heavily polluting cars on the roads. So the Greek government made a law where only cars with odd-numbered final digits on their number plates, 1, 3, 5, and 7 and 9, etc., could be driven on odd-numbered days. 1st, 3rd, 5th, etc., and only even-numbered cars could drive on evenly numbered days. Sounds great, doesn't it? They'll halve the number of cars on their roads, right? No, they doubled it. Everyone brought one old, highly polluting car that had an odd-numbered plate and another with an even-numbered plate. Nobody could park and the air was worse than before. A hotel I used to work for decided they were having an alcohol-free holiday party. This didn't sit well with the people who'd been working there for years and were accustomed to a full bar at the party. The staff parking lot ended up being full of people drinking in their cars, trying to get a good buzz to carry them through the party, and most people ended up getting way drunker than they would have done so. The party was a crap show. My friend had a non-alcohol wedding. Nearly everyone took fairy dust instead, completely opposite of the sober event the parents wanted. The previous school I worked at decided that all shirts needed to have the school name or emblem, which was a fancy letter E, on them to be dress code appropriate. That's all the handbook said. No clarification on how the name or emblem was displayed, or the color, or if it had to be permanently affixed to the clothing. The students hated the policy, and being in high school, looked for any loophole possible. They found one due to the lack of clarity of the handbook policy. The kids would make paper E's and pin them to their shirts. Thus, they could wear whatever they wanted, and by pinning the E to the shirt were still dress code compliant. I thought it was pretty genius. The administration did not. Explicit adult content being banned on Tumblr. If you look for why LiveJournal failed, you'll read that it was old and obsolete or new platforms were hipper. Nope, it did two things. Number 1, made itself harder to use with crappy new features. Number 2, it banned adult content. Wait, I thought weird adult content was all Tumblr was good for. If I want wholesome, pointless bullcrap, Pinterest already exists. If they took adult content off Tumblr, there'd only be one blog left called Bring Back the Adult Content. Catholic school. This school started out not having a problem with Harry Potter. Library had every available book at the time. Not all were even written yet. Some paranoid parent cried Satanism and witchcraft, so the school banned Harry Potter. Suddenly, Harry Potter books are an underground commodity. The school had a black market trade for new and used Harry Potter books, and things only got worse when expulsion was threatened for being caught with one. A new Harry Potter book was worth its weight in gold. Finally, the school had to go all the way to the bishop about the Harry Potter books, and he said, "No, the books don't really teach Satanism. What is all this about a black market book trade?" So the school lifted the ban and told the parents to cool it. Doesn't this happen in one of the Harry Potter books when Umbridge bans the issue of the Quibbler where Harry has told the truth about Voldemort returning? Suddenly everyone had to get their hands on it and read it because it was prohibited. I worked at a contract agency that works with Child Protective Services. CPS policy is to never tell the parents who called CPS on them, but my agency's policy was to always inform the primary caretaker if one of our social workers called it in. Obviously, this irrevocably destroyed our rapport with our clients. Imagine telling a parent you called CPS on them only to knock on their door the next week to listen to their concerns. The agency made an asshat out of us, and all potential for case progression was out the door. Stupid rule, if you ask me. A salon I worked at one day decided to drug test the hairstylists. Out of the 12 stylists, 11 failed. The manager texted everybody the next day and told them to come to work. I'm a stylist and I say this to applicants all the time. If they drug tested, there wouldn't be anyone working here. No card games at school. When I was in elementary or middle school, Magic the Gathering and the Pokemon card game were pretty popular. Almost all the guys played and would get together after lunch to play before classes started again. Here is where it's important for me to mention that this was a Christian school. It probably didn't take long for a teacher, administrator, or helicopter parent to wonder what all the fuss was about. Sure enough, one of them probably got a hold of a Magic the Gathering card, saw art depicting a demon, and decided that this had to be the work of Satan to warp our young minds. Almost overnight, all trading card games were banned from school. Any cards would be confiscated until the end of the school year. Well, now you have several dozen prepubescent boys with about 30 minutes of free time and nothing to do. So we did boy crap. Ran around, pushed each other, went places we weren't supposed to, just overall got into mischief. All this time, they had a free babysitter that was keeping us all engaged, quiet, civil, all while reinforcing quick math skills and teaching multi-level problem solving. The next year, we got a new administrator and card games were allowed at school again. When I was in school in the era of Pokemon cards, if you'd tried to take ours away, there would have been a full-blown revolt. This school, if anything, got off lightly. When I worked for immigration, some bright spark decided that we weren't going to remove people who had been caught smuggling illicit substances from certain countries. They believed it was too risky to deport people who had failed to complete their jobs back to angry gangs. News traveled quickly, and within a few weeks there was a huge spike in smuggling. People were smuggling over illicit substances and immediately handing themselves over to authorities to guarantee they wouldn't get deported. In addition, dealers found it much easier to convince people to attempt to smuggle illicit substances because it was a win-win for all parties. The whole idea was scrapped pretty quickly. Not exactly a rule, but just last week my job thought it was a good idea to take away our electric cart pusher machine because they felt we didn't need it. The very next day, the place was absolutely packed and we couldn't get carts in fast enough. In an attempt to discourage surfing during work hours in 50s Australia, the government brought into effect a law which stated that any man surfing before 5 p.m. would have to do so in a dress. This prompted more people than would usually be surfing during the daytime to don their wives' dresses and head down to the beach and surf for the couple of weeks the law existed. Lawyers, has there ever been a time the opposing counsel accidentally proved your case for you, and what happened? My favorite is a story from Gary Spence. For those of you who don't know, he's a famous trial attorney. A witness on the stand was claiming that he suffered injuries to his arm because of a city bus accident. Jerry asked him to demonstrate to the jury how far he can lift up his arms after the accident. The witness makes a feeble effort of lifting his arm. Then Jerry asks the witness to demonstrate to the jury how far he could lift his arm up before the accident. He lifts his arm much higher. The jury laughs. The case is over. Domestic violence case where the husband beat the wife senseless. Landlord tried to evict wife for breach of lease due to the beating. Landlord claimed wife violated lease terms by allowing police to be called to property and causing a disruption. My argument was that as a domestic violence victim, wife is covered under the VAWA, and the property is HUD subsidized. Also, MD law offers domestic violence protections too. Landlord's counsel during his opening talks about how my client was beaten and the police were called and an ambulance, etc. I just stood there looking at him. When he finished, judge asked if I had anything to say. My response, "No, Your Honor, I believe opposing counsel has said everything that needs to be said." The judge smiled and ruled in my client's favor. Landlord can't evict a domestic violence victim. My family did foster care for a few years and we fell in love with the last girl we took in, now my younger sister. She was required to keep in regular touch with her emotionally and physically abusive birth mum, the intention being for them to eventually reunite. This woman was a horror. Every single time they interacted, she'd spend the duration painstakingly shredding my sister's self-confidence. My parents worked hard to establish a strong rapport and supportive environment, and she blossomed under their care. She's one of the most resilient people I know. When the state tried to return her to her mum, she didn't want to go, so my parents sued, I think, don't really know all the legal details, for guardianship. This seemed like it would be an uphill battle. Here we were, a family of randos trying to steal a kid from her rightful mum. We were really afraid she would have to go back and that her crappy family would systematically undo all the hard work she'd done rebuilding her self-esteem. Fortunately, her idiotic mum decided to represent herself at the guardianship hearing. I wasn't in the room, but I heard the audio recording later on, and it's incredible how thoroughly this woman shot herself in the foot. Some highlights. She kept trying to testify while cross-examining people. Would it surprise you to learn that blah blah blah? The judge called her out for this like 6 separate times, and she just kept doing it. She would admit to various incidents of emotional abuse, but then tried to argue that it was all justified because her daughter was being a B-word. She'd ask witnesses, for example, "And wouldn't you be angry if your daughter did XYZ? Yes or no?" My personal favorite and best example of her proving our case. "It's absolutely not true that I hit my daughter with a wooden spoon. I only tried and missed. I'll prove it. I can show you the mark I left in the door frame." Needless to say, we won guardianship. My sister never has to see that awful woman again unless she damn well pleases. The Dunning-Kruger effect occurs when a person's lack of knowledge and skills in a certain area cause them to overestimate their own competence. This lady may be a walking, talking example of said effect, both in her capacity as a parent and a lawyer. I worked as an intern for a lawyer. Construction laws in France are quite strict in regards to the neighboring of historical monuments. The city was denying a permit for heavy modification of the house of our clients. They were arguing that because you could see the house from the church's bell tower, modifications were impossible. As a support, they kindly linked us a 360-degree picture from said bell tower. We, as kindly, pointed out to them that our client's house was indeed not visible from the top of the church. Building permit was greenlit the following day. Not a lawyer, but I am a former insurance fraud investigator. We were at a hearing before the WCB. I had something like 18 hours of video spread over a 2-week period of a claimant doing roofing work. The problem for me was that the video didn't get a clear face shot. Normally, what we liked to do was get in close, show the face for positive identification, and then zoom out. Bonus if the claimant was wearing distinctive clothing that could be easily tied to him. Because of where this guy lived, all I could do was show someone who matched his description getting out of a truck registered to him every morning. He wore a hat, he had a beard, and he had neither at the hearing. So the company lawyer is prepping me and basically letting me know to be on point because the claimant's attorney is almost certainly going to challenge the fact that it is his client in the video. If the video got tossed, the case was lost. About 2 minutes into the hearing, claimant's attorney agrees to stipulate to the fact that it is his client in all of the video. All of it. Our attorney was shocked. That was pretty much the only leg he had to stand on. Claimant attorney was incredibly smug right after this, like it was no big deal. Evidently, his strategy was to show that his client wasn't really a professional roofer since he was doing the roof the wrong way. He tried to get me to answer questions about roofing. I refused as it was beyond the scope of my work, and he just wouldn't let it go. After about an hour of back and forth over this, the judge finally said, "Counselor, it doesn't matter if your client is doing the work well. What matters is that he has stated numerous times under oath that he cannot work. Whether he's doing it for free, for cash, or for fun, has no bearing on the fact that he's doing roofing work while collecting compensation benefits, which he was awarded because he couldn't do roofing work." The guy lost and had to repay a bunch of benefits. After a few of those hearings, I began formulating a list of lawyers I would never hire and ones who I would absolutely want on my side. I had to go to court over a financial screw-up when I was a student. Took advice from the university legal support team who said I didn't need a solicitor, so I went alone. The judge didn't like this and postponed it for another date so I could prove I'd had more counsel first. The other party's solicitor caught me outside the court and said, "I didn't tell you this, but..." and pointed out a huge error in the financial paperwork that made it very obviously come out in my favor. Went back to legal support, got confirmation that it was right, went to the second hearing alone and got the entire thing thrown out. The other solicitor winked at me as he left. Saved me about $9,000. Nice chap. Not a lawyer, but took my brother-in-law's landlord to small claims court. He's on SSI and I'm his conservator. We sued her for over $4,000 after she just decided she didn't like him and changed the locks on his apartment door. She also stuffed all of his belongings into trash bags and dragged them out to the curb. This was all done the day after she cashed his rent check. It all started because she was letting herself into his apartment with no notice and was going through his stuff while he was gone. When I found out about this, I told him to let her know that it was not okay. He did, and that's why she kicked him out. I'm very organized and presented the judge with a folder containing photos, receipts, short videos on DVD, and the sheriff call logs, as well as a concise timeline of events. The landlord showed up with her son and countersued for the exact same amount we were suing them for, claiming that the apartment was trashed, there were holes in the walls, and they would have to repair everything before being able to rent again. During the hearing, the judge asked for evidence of the damage to the room. The son whipped out his cell phone and showed a video panning and walking around the room. The video showed my brother-in-law's apartment obviously still being lived in. His stuff was all still there, and no visible damage, but there were a lot of posters and things hung on the walls. When the judge looked at the video, he asked, "Where's the damage?" The son replied, "You can't see it. It's behind all the posters." The judge frowned and looked at the video again and said, "Did you take this video when he was still living here at the time?" The son replied, "Yes." This was the clincher. The judge then asked, "Did you ask his permission to enter the apartment to take the video?" Silence. We were awarded the full amount. There is just something so deliciously satisfying about this kind of case. A bunch of dishonest, awful people being utterly destroyed for their dishonesty. I had a misdemeanor possession case I was defending. Client was driving his mum's car. He gets pulled over for playing the stereo too loud. There are pills in the center console, in a prescription pill bottle. The bottle has his mum's name on it. Client gets arrested and charged with possession of a controlled substance without a prescription. Case is obviously bullcrap, but the dumbest DA I've met in my entire life won't dismiss. We go to trial. During closing arguments, the DA says, "This case is a circumstantial evidence case." During my closing, I slap the jury instruction on the projector that says if a case is based on circumstantial evidence and there is one factual scenario that points to guilt and one that points to innocence, the jury must find in favor of the defendant and acquit. My client was acquitted. I had a hearing where the opposing party offered an updated contract that my client supposedly signed, except it was a horrible copy and barely readable. Then he assured the judge that the new same as the old contract, except for the party name at the top. The original contract was in his mum's name, the new one in his name, and the date of the contract itself. He made that assurance multiple times. After he exhausted himself saying how everything was the same, I then pointed out to the judge that half the provisions were different, and that my client had never signed that form. The judge asked if we were really accusing him of forging my client's signature, since that's a serious accusation. I held up the guy's prior conviction for contract fraud and said, "I absolutely am, Your Honor." We won, hands down. No further argument needed. My dad's ex-girlfriend took us to court over his estate after he kicked her out. Her claim was that she was entitled to half the pie due to the de facto marriage. She had mountains of evidence of her contribution to Dad's company and running the private estate. Expense reports, receipts, dates and times her and Dad proved their relationship with trips and combined spending, etc., etc. She had so much evidence, the judge took 4 days to look it all over, after which he came back and basically said, "Why the heck would you have all this if this wasn't your plan the whole time?" The case was very downhill from there. Okay, for some more clarification, she'd done the same thing to her ex-husband, giving precedent. He and her children said so in their testimonies. One of her children even inadvertently admitted she'd told them what to say and paid them for it. We were able to name the date the relationship between her and my dad ended, which was months before she claimed, and outside the time limit to make it de facto common law marriage. We had testimony from the doctor at his ICU who said she tried to keep everyone, including his ex-wife, our mother, and us, his children, away from him. Meanwhile, she had his phone and computer and was trying to take over his contacts and businesses. We had proof of this. Her lawyer was a moron who constantly contradicted himself and the evidence. He lost documents, gave incorrect dates, and asked irrelevant questions of the defense. In the end, it was that her expenses for the relationship were deemed normal for anyone in any kind of romantic relationship. that gifts and meals aren't claimable for compensation, and that her contributions to the household and business were not sufficient to warrant compensation. She never actually put any money into either, and that the relationship was not sufficient in duration to qualify as a common law marriage. This case took 4 frickin' years to settle, including 2 elevations of appeals. She finally gave up because she'd run into about $250,000 of court fee debt, as well as being forced to pay us $40,000. Not a lawyer, but was taken to court once. A guy had taken my family to court basically because he had been dating my mother, and things ended. Every cheeseburger, every Kit Kat. He even billed for things he did like house repairs. Some of the repairs were terrible and ruined other things. He tried to unclog the sink and ended up destroying the main drain pipe for the house. Now, he had bought some more expensive things as well. No one asked him to, but he was one of the types that loved to show how much money he had and would always talk about his connections and would name drop someone anytime we went anywhere. So when he takes us to court with his full itemized list, the judge asks him to go first and present his testimony. He basically says, "While I was with them, I brought all this stuff. I took them to dinner all the time and all this, but it was the idea it would be paid back by them." Judge: "You brought a child a birthday cake with the idea it would be paid back. Did you ever say that these things were loans and not gifts?" Him: "Well, no, but I shouldn't need to. That's the normal way people think." Judge: "Well, that's not the way I think. Case dismissed." Imagine having such a jaded view of your own kind of dating ability that you take precautions to do this kind of thing if people have the nerve to break up with you. Ugh. Relative of a retired prosecutor. Relative was working misdemeanor criminal court. Cases get called in alphabetical order, and 2 women named Catherine Smith and Catherine Smith, with a K, were scheduled to have their hearings before the judge. Not their actual names, but you get the point. Both had similar names, but slightly different. So the bailiff announces the next case to the courtroom. Catherine Smith, with a C, for 1 count of possession of white powder with the intention to sell, and 1 count of selling her body. So Catherine Smith, with a K, stands up and indignantly cries, Whoa, just wait a second. Where the hell did the working girl charges come from? I may deal yayo, but I am not a working girl." Easiest illegal substance case my relative ever prosecuted. Actual lawyer here. From the Fool for a Client file. Was interning at Legal Services after 1L, doing discovery work for family law. My supervisor invited us to observe a hearing for our client, to get a restraining order against her husband. At the hearing, the client discussed various times he threatened her. The man, representing himself, interrupted and said, "Judge, I never said any of those things. If I had, she wouldn't be standing here." Restraining order granted. Not a lawyer, but here's a story from the burbs. My buddy's psycho neighbor built a wall too high and doesn't have proper drainage on his property for the very small creek/natural drainage in between their yards. My buddy hired an attorney as the psycho decided to sue him over it. My buddy's engineer looked over the property and noted not only did my buddy set his yard up right, but the neighbor created drainage problems. Neighbor hired his own engineer that proved my buddy was correct. Now the guy is likely to go postal. Case was going through to mediation. Since both engineers found fault with the psycho neighbor, my buddy decides he's going to take it to trial. Turned the tables a bit. I'm not a lawyer, but witnessed a pathologist win a case in court by destroying the defense's credibility. The question was over whether or not carbon monoxide poisoning could have caused certain signs of death in an individual, but the defense didn't study their chemistry very well and kept asking the pathologist whether carbon dioxide could have caused these signs. After thoroughly frustrating the defense by answering his questions incorrectly, the pathologist said very loudly, "Oh, I'm sorry, did you mean carbon monoxide? Because that's a completely different thing." Completely destroyed the defense's credibility in front of the jury. They were done after that. So I guess the opposing counsel screwed himself by not picking up a book. For clarification, this is not the only reason that lawyer didn't win. There were a lot of other things that didn't work out in his favor, but those were technical things that he probably knew about ahead of time. This was a case where he was asking questions that he thought were going to work out in his favor, but it worked out against him because he made a basic chemistry mistake that he honestly should have caught. Yeah, I know he's not a scientist, But you don't have to be a scientist to remember the difference between those two things. Getting terminology correct is a part of his job. It's not likely anyone caught a felony charge solely because he said that one thing wrong. A guy I used to work with was going through a messy divorce, about 20 years ago now. His soon-to-be ex-wife was a psycho, and her father was a psychologist, so he was pulling all of the strings. Even had my coworker arrested at work one day. Bullcrap charges. The divorce case took years, one young son involved, and at every turn my friend lost because of something the father filed for or another string he pulled. In the end, they were in court and it was very apparent that my friend was going to lose custody and all visitation rights. Every plea he entered was squashed and he was mentally broken. The judge asked the ex-wife if she had anything else to add, and she said she had a written statement that she wanted the judge to read. The bailiff took the paper from her and handed it to the judge, who unfolded the note and read it. He stopped for a minute and asked her if she was certain she wanted this note added to the case, and she said yes. The judge turned to my friend and said, paraphrasing, "Mr. Insert name here, all these years and all these claims that I ruled out against you, the court profusely apologizes. I did not believe you, but now I do. Ruling in your favor." Bangs the gavel. "I grant you full legal and physical custody of your minor child. Bailiff, please handcuff Miss Name here." My buddy was stunned that he won and happy at the same time. He later found out that the note said, "Give me my son, or I'll frickin' kill you." There you go, folks. Threaten the judge. That can only go well for you. You heard it here first. Not a lawyer, I know, but my parents were in a lawsuit where this happened. They owned a business, and on either side of it were other businesses. Their neighbors to the left sued us, claiming that they had been using their property without paying them or without permission, that we were essentially trying to adverse possess it. We got a surveyor to come in, and the surveyor said that not only were we using all of our property, but we had been paying rent to them on about 20 feet that was also our property. Obviously, they weren't happy, so they got their own surveyor, who gave us 50 feet. We won the lawsuit. Now, their little patch of property has a rusty fence all around it with keep out signs everywhere. It's about 20 by 10 feet. When I first started, my firm had me on a case where the client had claimed he lost because of ineffective assistance of counsel, basically saying that the old lawyer didn't do his job. So we prepare an argument based on not asking the right questions, not communicating, etc. We think it's going to be a tough case, but not unwinnable. Then we get the response to our complaint where the old lawyer argues that he was only ineffective because he didn't have time to prepare his case and only reviewed it the morning of the original trial. He had known about the case for months, by the way. The judge saw this, and during the trial, we had essentially asked, "Isn't this the definition of ineffective counsel? Not giving enough time to your client?" The silence from his side of the court was amazing. Needless to say, the trial didn't last much longer. Thanks, opposing counsel. I guess you were ineffective for both of you. Not a lawyer, but in a suit against an employee, her attorney presented our contract and their contract to demonstrate the differences to prove that his client hadn't stolen ours. Where did you get our contract? Idiots. We won. Spent a couple of $100,000, defendants both ordered to pay $10K, filed bankruptcy and dissolved business, started anew with another competitor. Life. Not my case, but I was in courtroom watching a trial. Self-representing defendant who was accused of flashing a guard and pleasuring himself till, well, you know. As a pro se defendant, he defended himself at trial without an attorney. Prosecutor was doing well proving the case. When the female deputy was on the stand, the defendant asked her one question. "If you saw me do what you claim I did, then how big is my member?" The deputy responded by raising her hands and estimating about 15 inches. The guy grinned, turned to the jury and said, "Yeah, that's right," and sat down. Obviously, he was convicted. He was doing a 10-year prison sentence, so this conviction wasn't of much consequence, but I'll never forget it. Oh, I've got one. I was about 5 when this happened, but my parents explained it years later. There were a series of trees on the sidewalk in front of each house on the street. Although they were not part of our yard, the tree was owned by my parents and they were responsible for it. Some guy tripped over a branch and was seriously injured. He came after my parents for all of the money. The dude showed up with a mountain of evidence. Hospital bills, psychologists' testimonials, a photo montage of his slow and painful recovery, etc. Apparently, his lawyer brandished this stuff like a bat before court. My parents' lawyer thought he had a good case, until the first day of court, when he walked over with a picture and asked, "Is this your tree?" My parents looked at the photo in disbelief. No, that is actually not our tree." The opposing counsel repeated the question. It went back and forth a few times until my parents' lawyer incredulously produced a picture of their tree, which was, even to the untrained eye, a completely different tree. At that point, the opposing counsel whirled around and started screaming at his client, "You said that was their tree!" Case summarily dismissed. My parents walked out in shock, came home, and bought me ice cream. All's well that ends well. What is the most embarrassing way your body has betrayed you? I danced classical ballet for years when I was younger. One day when I was 12, we were doing a stretch where we were lying on our backs with our butts scooted to the wall and our legs stretched towards the ceiling. We would let our legs fall into the splits, letting gravity assist us. So we were lying there, listening to quiet piano music, my legs wide open, and the girl next to me was whispering jokes and making me giggle. I could feel the onslaught of explosive gas happening, but being young and stupid, I was afraid to close my legs because I thought I'd get into trouble. So I ripped the loudest, most terrifying toot to ever exist. I think I blew a hole in my little pink leotard, I swear to God. The room was a huge wooden studio, so that expulsion from hell was bouncing off the walls for like 15 minutes. All the little girls started screaming. I was screaming. The teacher was probably screaming. Still gives me nightmares. I stood up from sitting at work and screamed in pain because I got a cramp behind my nuts. I don't know how to explain it, but that's where I felt the pain. My co-workers were dying of laughter when I explained what my scream was. In 6th grade, I got hard for no reason and then was asked to go hand something to the teacher. When I stood up, this girl that sat near me stared right at my nethers with wide eyes. I'm just thankful she didn't tell anyone, or I might not have heard the end of it. Last summer, I tripped over something while walking on the sidewalk. Happens every now and then, no big deal. It normally just looks like a funny skip or something, except this time I kind of leaped forward into the air, and somehow the normal response message to put my hands before me didn't reach its destination, so I just dropped onto the ground like a human sack of potatoes. It was equally painful and embarrassing. Still don't know how the crap that happened. I was sitting on the floor in my cheap wooden condo and let out a huge guff of wind. Dog in the condo below me started barking, and I could hear the cute girl who lived there and her visiting parents laughing. A note from the narrator, this video has been a matter of spreading out the toot stories which, surprise, comprise the majority of accounts from this forum. Struggle on, my fellow gaseous humans. One time I was really sick, so I went to throw up in the toilet, and as I started throwing up, I simultaneously started pooping myself as well. Once you start throwing up, you can't exactly stop until you're done. So I just kept throwing up while crapping myself for the smelliest, most uncomfortable 5 minutes or so of my life. Ever since I stopped being able to throw up like a normal person, I'm always scared I'll crap myself, so I sit on the toilet bending over a bucket, even though it's harder to throw up that way. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this trip down memory lane as much as I did. When I was in high school, by starting a period without any of the usual symptoms and leaving a bloody puddle on the chair and huge stains on my jeans. This happened to me, and a boy I had a crush on told me about it, because I didn't realize. He asked me to go to the bathroom, he went to the admin office, got me a pair of track pants we used for PE, brought it to the bathroom, and got them to clean up the chair. Never told anyone that I know of. I was way too scared and embarrassed to ask him out or ever really talk to him again. In a meeting with my managers, they're complaining about X, Y, and Z that I haven't achieved. I'm not upset about the criticisms. If anything, I'm angry I have to hear them. But for some bizarre reason, my eyes started watering. We'd have these meetings weekly, and every time my eyes would water and tears would pour. It started just happening when I wasn't even angry. And even in normal angry situations, I'd never tear up. Just in those meetings. When I was 12, my best friend and I were hanging out in front of my apartment complex on the front step with two guys that we were super interested in. I was sitting on the top step with my bestie, and the two guys were goofing off farther down the steps and making us laugh. Well, I started laughing. So hard, in fact, that during one of those laughs where you're laughing so hard you're no longer making any noise, where you've basically lost control of it and can't stop, I started tooting really loudly. Even though I was mortified, I could not stop laughing and laughed harder, and then I started peeing my pants. I couldn't stop. The pee was running down the steps as I tried desperately to stop laughing by covering my ears and shutting my eyes. I finally gained control of my body and stopped laughing, but it was too late. My crush came over to sit next to me, and right before he sat down next to me, he saw the puddle of pee and jumped up in alarm and said, "Whoa!" I got up and tried to run inside, but I didn't have my key, so I had to ring the buzzer and had to wait for my mum to buzz me in front of them, with pee-soaked pants and the giant puddle of my pee that had run down half the steps. I stayed inside the rest of the day, and that night, my crush miraculously came back and asked me out through my bedroom window. Good God. How good was the joke that you experienced such a total loss of control? How did the trauma of your bodily evacuations not sober you up and stop you laughing? At least it seems to have humanized you enough for your crush to get brave enough to ask you out, so that's something. 2-hour train ride. I felt the air coming slowly, but I held it back until the end. Finally, the next stop was mine, so I stood up and walked to the door, still holding back that, now massive, amount of air in my colon. Just when the doors were about to open, some child stumbled into me from behind. It surprised me so much that I, just for a moment, didn't hold in. The result was the loudest, most disgusting butt blast you could ever imagine. I never left the train station faster in my entire life. Storytime. My grandmother was killed when she received the AIDS virus through a blood transfusion back in the day. Know that my grandma was the one that ate the bullet that makes hospitals screen blood. My family donates blood on her birthday. I hate donating blood. I hate needles, I hate seeing blood, and I hate the weird cold feeling you get through your entire arm. In a terrible twist of fate, I happen to have universal blood that is CMV negative. I can donate to babies and small children, which is apparently rare. Hospitals are always in short supply, it seems, as I am always getting calls to donate a double amount every time I'm eligible. I charge them twice as many cookies as they give to other people. One time, after giving a double dose, I was feeling just fine. I usually feel wiped out and need to go to sleep, but that day I was feeling fine. I got home and the wife was there, and we're trying to have a kid and we were both kind of flirty, so we went for it. I got in the buff when my knees wobbled, the room spun, and I just collapsed on the floor. I never lost consciousness, I was just sprawled naked on the floor, unable to lift my arms or legs. I could lull my head about. Don't try to have a romantic time after donating a double dose of blood. My husband was annoying me the other day, and I tried to toot on him, and I crapped myself. Not sure if it's just me, but if a girl is going to sit in my lap, I will get immediately hard. I don't go around trying to get girls to do this, but I have had a few insist and then call me out for being a pervert when I tried my best to persuade otherwise. Santa? Looks like you should change your name to Meat Uprising. When I inadvertently spit on the monitor when I'm trying to explain something to someone. Dislocated hip while having adult fun times. Twice. I once went to school when I felt really sick. Within 10 minutes of me being at my school, my stomach started cramping, and I informed the teacher I was going home. It's about a 10-minute drive with my bike. Every time I went over the littlest bump, my stomach started hurting really bad. Not even 2 minutes of me biking to my house, I stopped to throw up. I threw up so bad that I started crapping my pants. A lot. Some of my friends started driving by, but I don't think they noticed me. I call my dad, who didn't have any way of bringing me home. He did, however, have a scooter. He comes along and I tell him I need to go home, but not on the bike. He tells me there's no other way, so I get on the bike, with crap still in my pants, and we drive home together. Not being able to burp or toot when I want to, but becoming a grandmaster butt trumpeter when most inappropriate. Was hanging with my boyfriend at his parents' house and was in his room, and we were just being silly, and in a moment of silence, I tooted for the first time in front of him, super loud, and at that same moment his mum walked in and silently turned around and left. He starts laughing at my super shocked face and the situation, and then I let out another slow, drawn-out, loud toot. It was hilarious, but oh my gosh, it was embarrassing at the time. It only happened like maybe 6 weeks ago. Just look at my fricking username. Thank you for your contribution, dear username I only have one hand. Honestly, entirely my own fault, but I drank too much one night and had a 3-hour train ride the next morning while completely hungover and nauseous. While in the train, I felt the need to throw up coming again, so I stood up to move to the toilet on board. This new modern fancy train had automatic doors on the toilet, and I couldn't figure out where the button was to close them, so I'm frantically trying to figure it out while suppressing my vomiting as much as possible. This sweet old lady who was sitting near the toilets noticed my trouble and pointed out the button to me, so I thanked her and closed the door and went. Very audibly. I didn't dare to look her in the eye when I walked by in shame. Brain. Let's have a seizure. Bladder.
Awesome! This is as good a time as any to pee yourself in front of everyone.
I am 30 years old. Last year, I pooped my pants. Full on. It was traumatic, shameful, and embarrassing. Be skeptical about any sounds your guts are making, people. My girlfriend and I went out one night to our local bar that does a wing night every week. It's our favorite bar, but also one of the only bars open all winter in our beach town, and wing night being the most popular night, we had to wait for a table for a while. Usually, we get 1 beer each during weeknights, but that night we had a lot more while waiting for a table. So after quite a few beers, some hot wings, and a night of all settling, the next day it needed out. I was at work, just me, my boss, and the head of all the offices in my state, 5 offices. I took one of the biggest dumps of my life and clogged the toilet the worst I ever have. 20 minutes with the plunger, I had to admit defeat. I told my boss, which was embarrassing as hell because she's pretty attractive. She called some plumbers, but none of them could come out that day, so I went back for another 15 minutes trying to get it to flush. I called it again, and the 3 of us left early since we only have 1 toilet in the office. The plumber came the next morning and got it cleared. So long story short, I ate too many wings, drank too much beer, and cost the company $150 the next day to unclog a toilet. In the womb, my lungs said, "Screw you," and have yet to cooperate 2 decades later. It's really cute when I can bench press 60 pounds, I'm a petite female, but I need a break after 2 flights of stairs. At a movie night with some friends and girls in high school, I somehow coughed and sneezed at the same time, and a huge snot rocket flew out of my mouth and onto the blanket. Very rarely I am walking and either one of my legs will just give out for like half a second. It's never enough to fall or anything, but it does make me look like I don't know how to walk or that I may be drunk. When trying on an engagement ring in a jewelry store, my finger swelled so much that I couldn't get it off. Even with lube applied by the store, it wouldn't go down. The ring just seemed bonded to my finger. I still remember feeling embarrassed when the jeweler smiled and said, "It's a good sign. This engagement ring is already married to your finger." The ring was eventually removed by soaking my finger in ice water several times to reduce the swelling. I have irritable bowel syndrome and get really insanely distended stomach full of gas when I eat certain foods. It looks like there's a basketball under my skin and it's all gas. My boyfriend of a year or so knew about my IBS, but hadn't really experienced the worst of it. One day we were hanging out at my apartment and I had my big gas belly. He knew what that meant, so I excused myself to my room to try and toot some of it out. He decides to come in to show me something on his phone as I'm laying on my bed with my knees up, trying to coax the gas out. He starts laughing at the sight. I start laughing. I feel an epic release of gas coming and I try to tell him to leave ASAP, but I'm also laughing. Between the laughter and the position I was in, I couldn't hold it back. I let out the loudest, longest toot in history. At first he laughed in surprise, then as it kept going on and on, his face changed from laughter to surprise to shock, mixed with what looked like a twinge of sadness. Watching him go through so many emotions right on his face just made me laugh harder, so the toot just kept going. After what feels like an eternity, he steps out of the room, hands over his mouth. He comes back in, and the butt blast is finishing off with a final toot toot toot. He is speechless. The first thing he says is, "I feel like I lived 80 years, died, and then came back to life again before that toot ended. I just don't understand how it was so long and steady, and then it got all Louis Armstrong at the end." And that's how he started calling certain trumpety toots Louis. Also, we moved in together a few months later, so my butt performance didn't deter him too much. Well, ladies and gents, I told you there were going to be a lot of stories on bowel movements, but believe me when I say I have actually reduced their representation in this video compared to the original forum post. Was on holiday in Fiji a few years back with the missus. We were playing rugby with some younger kids down the beach, and I wasn't feeling the freshest from a few to too many tequilas the night before. Wearing nothing but sports shorts, I got past the ball, partially crapped myself/sharted, and then hit legs, like it was a race between me getting back to the room before it made its way completely down the back of my legs. Grabbed the room key from the chair our things were on, dropped the shorts, and ditched them midway up to the room, up the stairs and down the straight for what felt like a effing lifetime. One trying to secure my privates, while the other held the room key for dear life, all while politely saying "bula" as I ran past everyone, somewhat covered in my own poop. Had a killer metabolism until 27. After that, I grew a belly even though my diet didn't change. I actually ate pretty healthy, and didn't drink alcohol, sober for 8 years, and exercised pretty regularly. I can blame my dad's genes for that, even though my mum's side of the family is as skinny as a rail. I was standing in the checkout line at Target getting myself a drink and a little snack because I hadn't eaten anything yet that day, and started feeling kinda crappy because of it. I got in the shortest line, and then my mum and daughter started talking to the cashier about how something should have been on sale. My hearing starts getting staticky, and my vision is getting dark, and I'm bracing myself on the conveyor belt, just trying to breathe and play it cool. Mum and the cashier keep talking about the coupon, and I'm thinking to myself, dear God, how embarrassing. If they have to call an ambulance and I'm taken out of this place on a stretcher, I can never come to this Target again. So they keep talking, and I just decide to sit down on the floor because that's just what you do. And I'm sitting there with my head on my knees when this manager walks up and in a kind of angry, confused tone, asks me if I was okay, and I stand up and tell her, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine," and play it off to avoid drawing any further attention from myself. I check out, take my stuff and sit in my car in a cold sweat and realize I had never fainted before in my life, and that I can never go to that Target again. On the bus, 2 hot girls in front of me, I fell asleep and woke myself up with a really loud moan that sounded like, didn't get laid. I didn't know what healthy eating was and ate as much as I could when I was a teenager. Now I have huge stretch marks for life. I can't go shirtless without feeling embarrassed. Dude, nobody on the planet, male or female, thinks stretch marks are horrible or unattractive. I speak for all of us when I say most of us don't notice, and the ones who do notice don't care at all. Getting whiskey wee-wee when hooking up with a smoking hot girl I knew. Had testicular torsion in the middle of performing a one-act play. Worst night ever. I coughed at work, which made my butt constrict, which tore open a hemorrhoid, which proceeded to soak blood through my pants. Had to leave work early that day. Friends, exploded butt isn't fun. Every time I get nervous or am in a bad and serious situation, I smile. Was working out at the gym a couple of years ago and decided to go do wind sprints on the basketball court. The basketball court is actually 4 courts lined up side by side with a walking and running track on the second floor looking down on it. This particular morning, the track was busy. After doing a couple of sprints, I noticed a basketball lying about 1/4 of the way down the court. So I, being all cool and stuff, started another sprint and bent down to grab the ball so I could scoop it up, dribble, and do a layup on the way down the court. My middle-aged, dumb self sprinted down the court, bent down and grabbed the ball, but was unable to correct to a standing position, so my momentum carried me to the ground where I slid on my stomach for what seemed like an eternity in front of all these people on the track above. To my credit, I got up and finished the layup. Middle age ain't fun, kids. Being pregnant and peeing myself a little every time I sneeze. First time hooking up with this guy I'd been lusting after for a while. No clue he was into it too, so double yay. Some, or all of, the drinks were had, and as a result my body completely refused to cooperate. No matter how into it I was in my head, or all he did to get me going, which was a lot and felt awesome, my lady flower stayed drier than the Sahara Desert. Late in my pregnancy, my body began producing a lot of relaxin, so my hips would constantly fall out of place. If I sat crisscross applesauce too long or sat with my hips below my knees for too long, I couldn't get up or walk for several minutes without help. So imagine my fury when I'm sitting on the couch eating some ice cream and my husband rips the foulest butt gas known to man and I can't effing escape. By growing a lump in my right testicle. Now I've had 3 strangers, read doctors, touch my nuts in the past 5 days, and I can still smell the lube from the ultrasound. Surgery is scheduled in 2 days to get the testicle removed. It's not ideal, but it's better than the alternative. I have to say the most embarrassing part is bringing it up to family, friends, and co-workers to keep them in the loop. I assure you, no one wants to talk about your balls, especially removing one. My own father clams up and hasn't reacted at all like I thought he would. I go back and forth between being incredibly transparent and then shy or ashamed. Touch your bits, everyone. It could save your life. I believe either grade 4 or 5 it was my turn to present my space poster I made up. After a minute of talking about what I've done and learned, I unleash an ungodly sneeze. Wasn't a little boy, "Achoo!" This bad boy was something a grown dad would do. This sneeze has me standing in front of my class with 2 massive streaks of snot dangling out each nostril hanging by my chin. I'm very prone to nosebleeds that range from paper cut amounts of blood to full-blown severed artery amount. Typically, they come along randomly during the early parts of November when heating units are turned on and the air is especially dry. Anywho, I wait tables for a living at a fancy restaurant, so this can be an especially problematic few weeks as they can pop up randomly while chatting with a table. One night, I had a couple in from out of town who declined drinks because they were so hungover from the night before. I mentioned that I was also having a rough day from the previous night, and we shared an empathetic laugh with each other. My nose then started to bleed rather badly, resulting in the table thinking their server was a heavy user of white powder. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.